Draco's growing team and new challenges. Draco stopped short as he saw Natsum and Kuroka in the middle of a private conversation. He raised a brow, intrigued, but a simple gesture from Kuroka kept him from prying. Whatever they were discussing could wait. "Hey Natsum, call Valina and Aquino. We're heading out to meet Tobio and the others." "Why, yes, sir." Natsum replied quickly, her voice unusually shy. Draco noted her change in demeanor. Her stiffness reminded him of the morning's events. Those shared kisses, the softness of her body under his hands. He couldn't deny he was tempted to explore more, but there was an obvious complication. Kuroka. She had encouraged him to form a harem, but how would she react to this development? Considering that Kuroka was speaking with Natsum now, he guessed she might already know. The thought was troublesome. How much did Kuroka know, and how would she handle it? Sighing, Draco decided to face the situation head-on. He approached Kuroka and wrapped her in his arms. She didn't resist, instead leaning into his chest with a satisfied sigh as she inhaled his scent. "Kuroka, honey, what are you doing out here?" "I was talking about the future with Natsum. You know, I have to say, you've got good taste," Kuroka said with a teasing grin. Her words confirmed Draco's suspicions. She knew about the morning's events. Rather than panicking, he decided to charm his way out of the situation. "Of course I have good taste. I chose you, didn't I?" he said, leaning down to steal a quick, tender kiss. Kuroka purred contentedly, but her next words were more direct. "And it seems Natsum is part of that taste now, yeah?" That kiss was intense. Her teasing tone was laced with curiosity. She grabbed Draco's hand and pressed it against her chest, her golden eyes sparkling mischievously. "Tell me, darling, whose are better, Natsum's or mine?" she whispered into his ear, licking it playfully. Draco chuckled softly. He knew Kuroka wasn't jealous, but rather seeking reassurance. She wanted to hear where she stood in his heart. Leaning down, he whispered, "Natsum's are incredible, soft, firm, and perfect in their own way. But they don't compare to yours. You're the woman I love most, the one I want by my side forever. No one else even comes close." Kuroka smirked, her cheeks faintly tinged with red. "You're smooth, yeah. But don't forget, if you don't take proper care of little Natsum, your favorite woman might just run out of patience with that dragon of yours." Draco laughed at her shameless yet endearing response. Only Kuroka could combine mischief with sincerity so effortlessly. The team gathered in an empty room within the apartment building. Draco sat in the center of a couch with Valina on one side and Natsum on the other. Natsum, still flustered, busied herself playing with Griffin, her sacred gear manifestation. Across from them sat Cookie Samejima, stroking his sacred gear, the white cat Byakusa, as it dozed in his lap. Lavinia and Aquino occupied a separate couch. While Lavinia appeared relaxed, Aquino's eyes darted toward Draco, clearly wishing she could sit closer to him. Tobio and Esif shared another couch, while Issei awkwardly positioned himself near Cookie, stealing glances at the gathered beauties. The room was a strange mix of light-hearted camaraderie and serious undertones. They were preparing for the next stage of their journey, but the gathering still carried the air of a casual meeting. Breaking the silence, Cookie pointed to Issei. "Who's the new guy?" Draco gestured toward Issei. "Introduce yourself." Standing stiffly, Issei said, "My name is Issei Hayu, 13 years old. I followed Draco and Isen here because I want to fulfill my dream." Lavinia tilted her head, curious. "What dream is that, Ayasekuin?" Without hesitation, Issei declared, "To become the harem king. I live for a pay." The room fell into a stunned silence. Draco simply sighed, while Valina smirked and Lavinia clapped enthusiastically. "Ayasekuin, one Isan supports your dream. When you're older, I'll introduce you to some lovely wizards at Rosenkreutz." "Really? Thank you so much." Issei's eyes sparkled, oblivious to the incredulous looks from the others. Meanwhile, Jean, Tobio's black wolf sacred gear, approached Issei, sniffing him briefly before returning to Draco's side. Draco glanced down at Jean and scratched behind the wolf's ears absent-mindedly. Despite being Tobio's avatar, Jean had always shown an inexplicable attachment to Draco. I almost forgot to mention, Draco said, breaking the awkward silence. Issei has a sacred gear, a Longinus, actually. The boosted gear, which contains the Red Dragon Emperor's soul. The revelation drew immediate attention. Lavinia turned to Valina, who was already brimming with battle intent as she eyed Issei. Completely unaware, Issei proudly displayed his gauntlet. I'm still learning, but Draco and Isen says it's really powerful, he said. Powerful indeed, Lavinia murmured. It seems our team is growing even stronger. The conversation shifted to Nephilim, the special institution where the group would train to master their abilities. Draco handed each member a guide outlining the school's rules and expectations. Have you all read the guide? He asked. Tobio, Sae, and Issei nodded, while Cookie glanced away nonchalantly. It explains the type of place Nephilim is and what's expected of you, Draco continued. Natsum can help if you have questions. She's already familiar with the institution. Pack your things. We leave soon. As the group dispersed to prepare, Draco leaned back, his mind racing. The journey ahead was fraught with challenges, but he felt a sense of purpose. Surrounded by this unlikely team, he was determined to lead them to a future where strength and unity would prevail. Draco led the group into the elevator on the first floor of the apartment building. Originally housing students, this building now served as a bridge to their new lives. The elevator, however, was more than a simple means of transportation. It was their gateway to Nephilim. Before entering, Draco handed out identification cards prepared by Azazel. These are your ID cards, he explained. Think of them as student cards granting you access to the institution. Valina and Lavinia lingered outside the elevator, not joining the group. Since I'm not a student, VH-on and I will head over later to observe, Lavinia said, her cheerful tone reassuring. Valina added with her characteristic smirk, get used to the strange area before we show up. Fufend. With their farewells exchanged, the elevator doors closed. Draco held the ID cards up to a certification device below the button panel. Without pressing a single button, the elevator began its descent. This floor has a basement? Cookie asked, his tone skeptical. Not quite, Draco replied. We're not descending in the traditional sense. This elevator connects the human world to the underworld. Right now, we're passing through the dimensional gap. Despite the explanation, the group remained tense as the elevator continued its descent for minutes. Sink, hesitant but curious, broke the silence. Draco-kun, can I ask you something? Of course. It's about Azazel, the Governor General. His name is the same as the fallen angel mentioned in the Bible, right? Tobio, who had done some research after meeting Azazel, nodded slightly. The myths surrounding Grigori and their leader, Azazel, had made him uneasy. Draco nodded calmly. Yes, it's the same as Azazel. He's the leader of the Grigori. The reactions varied. C was amazed, Cookie indifferent, and Tobio visibly anxious. Meanwhile, Issei, still new to the supernatural world, looked utterly confused. A fallen angel? That's so cool. I thought they only existed in fantasy stories. Issei exclaimed, eyes sparkling with excitement. Akino chuckled and pointed to herself. They're very real. I'm half human, half fallen angel. Issei's admiration for Akino grew, though Draco noticed it wasn't the usual lust-filled gaze. Perhaps it was because Akino had yet to mature fully, her petite figure not matching Issei's usual preferences. Don't overthink it, Draco said to the group. Azazel is powerful, but in this world, there are many on his level. Issei's curiosity piqued. Do you know anyone as strong as Azazel? Of course. My foster mother, for one. And your soon-to-be teacher, Akino's father, is practically on his level. Draco's mention of his foster mother caught Natsum's attention. If she wanted to grow closer to Draco, she'd eventually need this mother's approval. You've never talked about your parents before, Natsum said, trying to sound casual. You never asked, Draco replied with a shrug, though Akino gave him a sharp glare that clearly said, How could you keep this from me? I've never met my real parents, Draco explained. When I hatched from my egg, I found myself in a forest and had to survive alone for a few days. Then I met her, my foster mother, Tiamat. Tiamat? Natsum repeated, unfamiliar with the name. Ask around in the supernatural world, and you'll understand. She's one of the Dragon Kings. The mention of Tiamat caused Issei's boosted gear to tremble faintly, though the boy seemed unaware of the significance. The elevator finally stopped, revealing a familiar white space to Draco. A machine for scanning ID cards stood at the center of the room. Draco demonstrated its use, guiding the group through the process. On the other side of the teleport matrix, Barrakiel and Rainier awaited them. Aquino wasted no time rushing into her father's arms, his imposing presence melting into a warm smile as he hugged her tightly. This is your teacher, Barrakiel, Draco said. From now on, he'll be in charge of your training. Barrakiel gave a simple nod of greeting, though his gaze lingered on Tobio. Draco suddenly realized he'd forgotten to mention a crucial detail. Tobio was a descendant of the Himejima clan, exiled like Aquino's mother, Shuri. That made Tobio and Aquino second cousins. Aquino's mother and Tobio's grandmother were sisters, Draco explained. So, I guess that makes you two second cousins. Tobio's body tensed, his voice trembling. You're a Himejima? Yes, Aquino replied warmly. I didn't know Tobio-san was from the clan, too. It seems we've both suffered because of powers they don't accept. But don't worry, Draco and I-san is right. That family may be rotten, but not everyone in it is bad. Suzukane-sama has always been kind to me. Suzuku Himejima, the heir to the clan, was a name Draco had heard before. Both Shuri and Aquino spoke highly of her. If Draco ever needed to deal with Japan's clans, Suzuka might be the key. Barrakiel stepped forward, his expression softening. Aquino's grandmother and Aji Hidano were blood sisters. You can call me Barrakilaji-san if you'd like. The moment felt oddly familial, a stark contrast to the formal nature of their gathering. Well, Draco said, breaking the moment, from now on, you'll rely on Barrakiel for training and guidance here at Nephilim. With that, Draco turned to leave, motioning to Rainier. Come on, we got training to continue. Rainier groaned. God kill me now. The training room was a familiar sight. Draco and Rainier sat facing each other, meditating to clear their minds before beginning their session. After 10 minutes, they opened their eyes simultaneously and rose to their feet. Come, Draco said, signaling to start. Rainier summoned a spear of light, holding it defensively. She had learned quickly over the past 2 months that giving Draco any opening would lead to pain. Despite her improvements, she still struggled to match his speed and power. Draco's fist collided with her spear, shattering it instantly and forcing Rainier back. Though her light had grown stronger, it barely left a burn on his hand. Draco fought with only his physical body, refraining from using any of his skills or powers. For him, this was training, not just for Rainier but to hone his restraint. Why do you keep holding back? Draco asked, his frustration evident. You're capable of so much more. Rainier flinched but said nothing. She knew what he meant. Her sacred gear and holy flame, the very powers that had caused her parents' deaths. She feared them, even after all this time. Draco sighed. If you don't push past your limits, you'll never grow stronger. Rainier didn't respond, instead summoning another spear and launching an attack. Her strikes were aggressive but unfocused, her mind clearly elsewhere. Draco easily dodged and countered, landing a light blow that disarmed her again. You're distracted, he said, stepping back. Focus. This time, Rainier steadied herself. Her eyes sharpened, and she summoned multiple spears of light, a skill she had been secretly practicing. With a mischievous smile, she launched them all at once. The spears descended with incredible speed, creating a shockwave that momentarily filled the room with dust. When it cleared, Draco stood unscathed, though a small cut on his shoulder dripped blood. Impressive, he said sincerely. Rainier's face lit up with a proud smile, but Draco couldn't help but think of Kuroka's words echoing in his mind. A harem, huh? Draco shook off the thought and readied himself. Let's continue.
Hey everyone, Quantum Audiobook here. Sorry for interrupting, but if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your thoughts on this novel in the comments, and don't forget to like the video.
Rainier slowly opened her eyes. Once again, she had lost consciousness while training with Draco. Seriously, couldn't he be a little more gentle with her? She was just a girl going through her teenage years. Was there a need to push her to such limits? Rainier's lazy tendencies started to come out at that point. After all, she wasn't born to train. She opened her eyes with difficulty, probably because she had been sleeping for hours. Well, more than sleeping, Draco had knocked her out. It had been another 2 weeks since the training in which Rainier had managed to make Draco bleed. Achieving such a feat had been a great achievement for Rainier, but she had ended up regretting it later. That damn Draco had doubled the intensity of the training. With difficulty, Rainier lifted her upper body. The first thing she saw was the peaceful face of Draco, who was meditating with his back to the wall. Sigh, just seeing Draco's handsome, masculine face in this manner made all the suffering of training worthwhile. Didn't she want to be able to be useful to Draco in the future? This was the training needed to keep up. She knew of Akatsuki and the members that made it up, from Sacred Gear's users of the highest level to Longinus, to yokais and dampiers. There was no doubt that, in terms of talent, the entire new generation that made up Akatsuki's group was comprised of talents of a frightening level. There was no way Rainier would keep up with them if she did not follow the infernal training with Draco and Barrakiel. It was impossible as long as she continued to refuse to use her sacred gear and her holy flame. "You're awake." It wasn't a question, but a statement by Draco. He had already opened his eyes and stood up. "Stand up. We're leaving." Without waiting a moment, Draco ordered Rainier. From his tone of voice, Rainier knew it was useless to argue with him. "Aren't we going to keep training?" Rainier asked curiously. "Yes, but this training is going to be a little different." At the same time that Rainier was having her conversation with Draco, the other members of Akatsuki were also training at Nephilim. The duo of Tobio and Cookie, dressed in sportswear, were running on the institution's indoor track. Having run around the track many times, they finally finished the 15-kilometer limit. Cookie, the first to finish, sat down immediately upon reaching the finish line. With sweat pouring off his body, he cursed. "Damn, making us run mile after mile? It's like we're getting ready to run the Olympics. I haven't run like this since mid-school." Tobio, who had arrived a little later than Cookie, heard him curse. He said as he breathed heavily, "According to what Barrakiel-sensei says, everything begins with resistance. I feel that somehow or other I understand it, since to run from one place to another resistance is fundamental. In the end, we're just beginners in this world. From the moment we joined Akatsuki, we knew we were going to have to fight all kinds of people with powers. So it wouldn't be strange if one of us died if we aren't prepared. They had been instructed for 2 weeks by one of the leaders of the fallen angels, Barrakiel. Both the theoretical and practical classes were taught by Barrakiel, so they had received the name of Barrakiel class, Barrakiel Karasu. There were a limited number of leaders at Grigori, so receiving instruction under one of them was extremely valuable, or so Draco had told them. Barrakiel, having taught them the fundamental knowledge, had assigned Tobio and the others to increase their resistance. No matter what, without resistance, they would not move to a higher level. For that reason, they had to make those long-distance runs. Cookie had suffered serious injuries in the previous battle. Yet, after he had recovered to near his usual condition, he was also participating in these long-distance races. He did not feel any discomfort, and this was due to his sacred gear. The white cat that was his sacred gear, Byakusa, approached his master when he finished the long-distance race, and had been acting very spoiled while rubbing his head against him. Speaking of sacred gear, in the case of Tobio's partner, Jean, who had run alongside his teacher for the 15 kilometers, he had sat down politely just after finishing. Unlike Tobio, Jean hadn't run out of breath once. "This is for my Hariim." Tobio and Cookie heard a scream as they rested. Akatsuki's newest member, Issei, ran the final sprint as he screamed like a madman. He crossed the finish line while shouting "Ipei," and dropped to the ground in an instant. Issei was 4 years younger than Tobio and Cookie, so the physical differences were obvious. He could not run as fast as Tobio and Cookie, nor did he have the strength or stamina they had. However, he countered their shortcomings with enthusiasm. Getting up in the morning was virtually a nightmare for Rainier, as she knew she would be going through hellish training. Nevertheless, for Issei, it was just the opposite. Not only could he see national-level beauties on a daily basis, but he could train and give his all for his dream of having a harem. Issei did not know how strong Draco was, but he knew that he had to be at least as strong as Draco to have his own harem. There was no doubt that Draco was Issei's idol at this point, and he had him as a reference for everything. Of all Barracuda students, Issei was undoubtedly the most dedicated. That kid's only got a pay and harem in his head, right? Cookie asked as he finished hydrating. He finished resting and took a rope to do the jump rope exercise, which was the next in the training regime. He has a lot of enthusiasm. If he keeps it up, I have no doubt he'll be able to fulfill his dream. Tobio commented as he also picked up a rope. Meanwhile, Issei approached them as she drank water from a pre-prepared bottle. Hey, Samajima-senpai, Ikkyu's-senpai. Let's give it all up for a pay. Issei picked up his rope and began to jump with a smile on his face. Seeing the energy Issei had, the other two could not be left behind. Hey, Ikkyu's, I thought you were some kind of honor student. What are you saying? I'm not an honor student, quite the contrary. I know. I've noticed that. But I've also realized something else. Tobio Ikkyu's, do you hate to lose? Cookie and Tobio were a bit apart from Issei, so he could not hear their conversation well. On the other hand, the boy was so focused on his training that he didn't know what they were talking about. What are you talking about? Well, your behavior is exemplary as an honor student, and yet there's something in the twinkle of your eye, like you don't want to show any weakness, even if it's only for the dog that's your alter ego. To begin with, I'm not an honor student. My grades are average, and I don't stand out physically either, Tobio responded. As Tobio said, from the time he had been at the Ryuku Academy, he had not been the type to stand out. He was just a typical high school boy whose studies were reasonably good and whose physical training was passable or non-existent. As for her childhood friend S.E., she was the popular one in class. Listening to Tobio, Cookie burst out laughing. That's very Now that I think about it, you were totally unknown to me when we were in school. If you were someone who stood out, I would have known of your existence somehow. If you were the Cookie of the past, Tobio would be no different than a stone on the side of the road. On the contrary, as far as Cookie was concerned, who was famous for his delinquency, Tobio had heard quite a lot about him. In the middle of the jump rope, the voices of the girls were heard. Zay, are running like that, it's certainly good for the diet, that is. Other than that, are you sure you're okay? Tuja-san. Pho, one way or another, I can handle it. Dad is too strict, he shouldn't force us girls to run like this. It was Natsum, Sae, and Akino who were out of breath. They were dressed in women's sportswear. Somehow, they had managed to finish the long-distance race. For Essie, who was not endowed with a sacred gear like Tobio and the others, only the classroom part was enough. However, since it was a good opportunity to improve her own endurance, and since she had been rehabilitated, she had chosen to undertake some basic training. Although it was light, considering that she was SAE after that incident, there was no doubt that it was intense for her. As for Cookie, who had been injured in the same incident, he had run the long distance and was now even jumping the rope with repeated light jumps as if he had not been pierced in the chest. Watching the training was Barracuda. He watched them seriously and nodded to himself from time to time. He approached the group. You've already finished the long-distance race. That still leaves half the regimen. Hydrate and prepare for the next. At first glance, the tall man emitted an intimidating atmosphere. However, contrary to his appearance, he was a rather considerate person. As far as special training was concerned, without tolerating compromise, he would not give up until everyone had finished what he had set out to do. But, having measured the boy's physical and mental limits, Barracuda made sure that the training never went beyond his limits. Instead of urging Tobio and the others out loud, considering that they were complete amateurs, he, while watching them personally, walked among them giving advice. In this way, Tobio and the others had completed the foundation of their special training. Now, They had to change places to perform the second part of the training. From the athletic track, they moved to a large training room. The ceiling was very high, and you could see that it was a place made to have the freedom to fight. "You are here." Two people were in the training room when Tobio and the rest came in. They were Draco and Rainair. "Your opponent today will be Rainair. Do you understand? Unlike your usual training, you're now going into one-on-one combat. Cookie, you go first." For these 2 weeks, they had been fighting Valina. The girl was bored in the mornings, so she would stop by to see how the rest of Akatsuki's members were improving. "Listen, Rainair. Tobio and Cookie are used to fighting Valina, so don't put them down and take it seriously," Draco warned Rainair, for he knew her habit of disparaging opponents who seemed weaker than she. This training was key to seeing how they had all improved, as they were facing people of a very similar level. Valina had spoken highly of Cookie and Tobio. She seemed to be enjoying the growth beyond what was expected of Cookie and Tobio. She had taken the initiative to take over these practice fights. The first to advance to face Rainair was Cookie, and alongside him was his faithful companion, Byakusa. Cookie placed Byakusa on his shoulder, settling into his fighting style. On the other hand, Rainair created a light lance. Without a doubt, this was a fight between two Lancer-type fighters. Tobio, Sei, Issei, Natsum, and Akino were watching from the side, encouraging the two who were about to fight. After confirming that both sides were ready for battle, Draco announced the fight, saying, "Begin." The first one to move was Cookie. Byakusa's tail that had been placed on his shoulder was being altered, becoming longer. It wrapped around his arm like a scroll and formed into a sharp, cone-shaped spear. At that moment, electricity began to run through him as it produced a crackling sound. At the moment of the conflict with the Utsusimi agency, Cookie unconsciously took Byakusa to the next stage, one step closer to its true form of Shur Akuma Fiend. In doing so, Byakusa achieved a transformation from a white beast, a large animal at least 3 meters in size that possessed the appearance of a saber-toothed tiger. It did not currently have that shape, but concerning the brilliant phenomenon that had manifested itself when it had transformed into the great beast, it became capable of releasing it from its usual cat size. Cookie was now producing it through the spear. Rainair focused, even more, when she felt the intensity of the spear. She had considered Cookie a formidable enemy with Draco's warning, but it seemed she had still underestimated him. The one who began was Cookie. Stepping in nimbly, he maneuvered the living spear with sparks toward Rainair. Rainair, showing no sign of evasion, faced her own spear with Cookie's. The sound of sparks was heard in the training room, the result of the clash between the two weapons. A crack appeared in Rainair's spear. The two took a step back, and it was at that moment that the results of Rainair's training with Draco were displayed. Rainair reacted instinctively when she took a step back, and immediately began an offensive. She swung her spear to Cookie's side, but Byakusa's second tail got in her way, and the impact destroyed Rainair's spear of light. Rainair did not end there, however, as she kicked the defenseless side of her opponent. Cookie was forced to retreat. Rainair's kick came with considerable force and could have broken a rib or two. At this point, Rainair had the advantage. She was superior to Cookie in every way. It was also true that Rainair could not be compared to a boy who had only been training in a film for 2 weeks. Cookie had very little chance of winning, but he wasn't going to give up. Once he recovered, Cookie pounced on Rainair again. Once again, the spears collided, creating sparks. Cookie, knowing that Rainair was no weakling, left no room for her to fight back. He realized that his sacred gear could destroy Rainair's spears, so he tried to create a battle of attrition in which he would benefit. Now Rainair had to deal with 2 problems. The first was the obvious battle of attrition, and the second was Byakusa's second tail. Although she could defend herself well, and even take the offensive lead, Rainair could not deliver a decisive blow that would end the battle. Rainair was about to go on the offensive once more when she felt she could not move. Byakusa's tail had become entangled in her foot. Kwoki saw that this was his chance to launch an attack, and he attempted to strike Rainair. Akino, who was watching the fight with Draco, asked him, "Is Rainair Nachon going to lose?" Draco smiled and shook his head, but said nothing. The others had paid attention to Draco's response, so they were surprised to hear his answer. What do you mean? The victory is Samaji McCoy's. Rainier-san can't even move. Natsum pointed out the obvious. In fact, Draco would have thought the same thing if the fight had taken place 3 weeks earlier. But everyone has a trick or two under their sleeve. Draco had only to see the wicked, sadistic smile on Rainier's face to know that the battle had been decided. Art! Blood fell to the floor, and Cookie screamed in agony. 2 spears of light had stabbed into both of Cookie's legs, disabling his movements. Rainier looked on calmly as Cookie knelt over his wound. She looked up at Tobio and said, "The next one? The next one?" Rainier held an upright stance, showing pride in her victory. Issei and Natsum helped Cookie retire. He couldn't move his legs, as they had been penetrated by Rainier's light spears. As Tobio approached Rainier for the next fight, Draco used his healing ability on Cookie's legs. He could only accelerate Cookie's innate recovery, but that was all that was needed. Byakusa placed its 2 tails into the holes in Cookie's legs, which improved his speed of recovery far more than Draco did. In the end, Draco's skill was still an offensive skill against beings of darkness, so his healing was limited. "You done well, Cookie. TCH. No need to comfort me, boss." Cookie bit his lips. He did not like to lose, but he was angry because he had lost to the fallen angel he had called useless 2 months ago. Draco was not comforting Cookie. He really thought the boy had performed well. After all, Rainier had managed to make Draco bleed, so defeating Cookie in a fight where he was not using the full power of Byakusa at all was as expected. Of course, if Byakusa were to transform into the colossal tiger form, there was no way Rainier would stand up to that. Damn, even Draco would have trouble in a close fight against that, and he would even be at a disadvantage on his human form. Besides, from what Azazel had told him, this wasn't even the full form of the sacred gear. If the sacred gears of the 4 fiends were fully developed, the creatures would be on par with the sacred beasts of the 5 great clans. If these beasts did not reach to the power of a Mao, they were very close. What will be the power of these beasts in their respective balance breaker? Tobio was already facing Rainier, who had a light spear ready. Jean and Tobio did not merge like Cookie and Byakusa did, but they also had their own fighting technique. From the shadow of his feet, Jean created a sword and held it horizontally with his mouth. Jean, who had lost the ability to create blades from his body, was now able to voluntarily create swords that came out of any and all shadows. That Jean was able to act independently was proof that he had matured compared to when he was a puppy. But Jean was not the only one who had improved in this time. Tobio had also manifested a growth in his ability. Tobio, with a murmur as he concentrated, was demonstrating a specialized weapon from the shadow at his feet. Tobio held the handle that had grown under his feet, then pulled it out at once. What he held in his hand was a scythe. Drawing an elegant bow, it was a specialized weapon for eliminating targets. It was not a scythe that was used to harvest weeds, but was similar to the large sickles wielded by Grim Reapers. Jean was not the only one who could create swords from the shadows at will. During the battle against the Utsusimi Agency, Tobio had personally experienced that not only his partner Jean, but he would also have to mobilize during the battle. If he had to run from place to place on the battlefield, giving orders to Jean, he would not survive what was to come. Before selecting the scythe as his weapon, Tobio had tried to wield and swing all manner of swords. None of them had left Tobio with a satisfactory feeling, however. Unexpectedly, when Tobio picked up a scythe for the first time, he felt he had found his soul mate. Turning the scythe over and over, lifting it up, pulling it hard, and then swinging it down, Tobio was able to do all of that easily. So Tobio, facing Rainier as a training partner, prepared himself after turning the scythe several times. Neither one was ahead of the other, as they both attacked at the same time. With a loud clank, both weapons collided. The blade of Tobio's scythe was close to Rainier's neck, but the tip of the spear was inches away from Tobio's eye. But neither of them could keep up the pressure on the other. In this first move, you could say it was a draw. The two parted and collided again and again. It seemed that the two were doing an exquisite dance, where both were trying to get the advantage, but were unable to do so. Tobio had learned from watching the fight between Rainier and Cookie. He was not a natural fighting genius, and it was not as if he could know how Rainier would move. Still, he had at least learned that he did not have to leave any room for Rainier, or he might end up like Cookie. But Tobio couldn't keep up with Rainier. He wasn't like Cookie, who had grown up on the streets like a delinquent, nor did he have a physical strength base to go with it. 2 weeks of training had made him better, but it was still not enough. Slowly, Tobio was cornered. At least he was defending himself decently. On his skin, you could see cuts created by the Rainier's spear, but they were all superficial. Or so Draco had explained to the eager. She had a frightened expression at the sight of Tobio covered in blood, so Draco had to calm her down before she ran to help Tobio. Though it was Tobio who was suffering the most, it was not as if everything was a path of roses for Rainier. The difference between the quality of Tobio's scythe and the spears Rainier created was too much. If the Cookie could destroy Rainier's weapons with a little effort, Tobio could easily cut the spear if it made contact with the curved blade of the scythe. Tobio's blade could cut through anything. Draco had a feeling that in the hypothetical event that his defense was 1,000 times greater than Tobio's attack, he would still be able to cut through his skin. After all, Canis Lycaon wouldn't be a Longinus if he couldn't kill gods. Longinus were cheats after all, but Rainier only had to create another spear each time Tobio destroyed it. Even with Rainier's advantage, it seemed the fight wasn't over yet. It was not Rainier's first fight, and she had been training for over 2 hours with Draco, so she was beginning to feel tired. If she was the Rainier that Draco knew long ago, she'd have been exhausted in the first minute of the fight. However, the intensive training of Draco and Barrakiel had made her the warrior she was now. In close fights, it was always small accidents that decided victory and defeat. As he retreated, the footwork failed Tobio, and he stumbled. The fight is over. Tobio had barely stumbled, but Draco had already signaled the end of the fight. He had not finished the fight, but already knew who the winner and loser were. Rainier was surprised to see Tobio stumble, but she could no longer reverse her attack. If an outside force didn't stop her, the spear was going to stab Tobio's heart. Tobio! Now! S.E. shouted the name of her childhood friend, but it was overshadowed by the roar of Tobio himself. From the shadows of a pillar, a black shadow shot out like a bullet. The shadow struck Rainier, and she was forced to the ground. When she opened her eyes, she found 2 red eyes and a blade grazing her neck. No one had time to react, nor were they prepared for what had happened, except for Draco and Barrakiel. They had all been so focused on the wonderful fight between Tobio's scythe and Rainier's spear that they had missed Tobio's primary weapon. Tobio might have some skill in using the scythe, but that was not his best weapon by far. He was the bearer of a Longinus, and everyone seemed to have forgotten this. Draco could not help but marvel at what he was seeing. This was all the strategy Tobio had executed from the beginning. He had shown Jean taking up the blade, focusing on the dog. Then he had drawn his scythe. Rainier knew that Jean was the greatest danger to her, so she had not paid attention to Tobio. Tobio matching Rainier at first had forced the girl to pay more attention to him. By this time, Jean had already hidden in the shadows. Slowly, Rainier's attention was drawn to Tobio. The scythe could break its spears, so she had to put much of her concentration on it. At the same time, Rainier felt that she was very close to winning, but she was just not able to deliver the final blow. She gave everything to defeat Tobio, so she completely forgot about Jean, that had scored the game. Tobio, knowing that his skill was inferior to Rainier's, had devised a strategy to beat her. There was also the possibility of joining forces with Jean from the beginning, but the fight could have ended differently. It's over. Jean! Draco officially ended the game. With the boss call, Jean released Rainier, and the sword he held in his mouth disappeared. Tobio fell to his knees, exhausted after the fight. The tension had been extremely high, and the adrenaline had helped him endure the pain of his injuries. Once the fight was over, his senses were overwhelmed, and he could no longer stand. S.E. immediately ran to help him, and brought him next to Cookie. Both had come out of this training with a vengeance, but both were satisfied. Cookie had lost, and he had complex feelings about the fight, but this had only motivated him to improve even more. Well, we're done here. Now straight to showers. We don't want any people smelling like pigs on the film. Barrakiel, who had been silent the whole time, ordered seriously. Despite how showy the fights were, they were not going to change Barrakiel's strict nature. In the end, almost everyone left the training room, but there were still 2 people left. Rainier had not reacted since Draco had ended the fight. She was still lying on the floor, staring blankly at the ceiling. There seemed to be no trace of life in her eyes. Do you understand now? You would have died if it was a real fight. Draco sat next to Rainier. Do you remember the last time you almost died? It's been months, but I'm sure you still remember. Draco was talking about when Rainier's uncle attacked Shuri and Barrakiel's residence in Japan. Rainier didn't respond, although Draco didn't expect her to either. All you did back then was scream, denying reality over and over again. Draco let out a sigh. And now, a boy who knew nothing of the supernatural world 2 months ago could have killed you. As a result, you're incapable of reacting. You're in shock. You don't want to believe in what just happened. You've defeated Cookie and become arrogant, and now you don't want to accept how close you came to dying. I'm sure that in your mind, you are trying to convince yourself that what is happening is not real. As if it were a nightmare. Draco was once again in the showers. As one of his favorite activities and one of his greatest pleasures that was second only to sex and little else, Draco took long baths every day. And today was no exception. In the end, Draco had left after leaving those words to Rainier, not without first proving that there was life in her. How could a girl have such a weak will? She had stood so brave and proud when she had defeated Cookie. Valina had spoken to Draco about Tobio and Cookie's improvements in combat. Still, he had never expected them to reach this level so soon. Draco knew that Cookie was very experienced in fighting, but Tobio was just an ordinary kid. Rainier had also been fighting 2-on-1 in every fight, as Byakusa and Jean were assisting their masters. But that did not detract from the 2 boys, as their sacred gears were part of their strength. Draco was more surprised to see the talent Tobio had with the scythe. He was a real natural prodigy, the kind you don't see for years. Not only that, but he was intelligent and dedicated to training. To have allies such as these was certainly a blessing for Draco. In the end, there were always limits to what only one person could do. When Cow's brigade makes their final attack, Draco will only be able to stand on one front. Since the locations to be attacked at the same time are numerous, Akatsuki needed to have talented members to support them anywhere. Draco's idea was to have at least 14 servants by the time Trihexa awakens. As far as he knew, Trihexa could divide its body into 7 parts, with which it would attack in 7 different places in the world. Draco wanted to send at least 2 servants to each location to get as many experience points as possible. Tobio, he was a good choice to be one of Draco's servants, but he wasn't going to use a fate point on him at the moment. Tobio wasn't like Kuroka, since he hadn't yet reached his full potential. Draco was not certain, but he had a feeling that it would be counterproductive to turn Tobio into a servant before he unlocked his full potential. Kuroka had not reached her limit when she became Draco's servant, but she was not so far from it. Tobio, on the other hand, was just an ordinary boy. If Draco were to turn Tobio into a servant, the outcome might be worse than expected. Draco sat in the outer bath, still not finished rinsing, as he thought about all this. "Diarin, how was your day?" said a voice beside him. Kuroka accompanied Draco 90% of the time when he bathed, where they always ended up having sex. It wasn't bad. Draco turned his head to look at the girl sitting next to him. She was a blonde girl dressed in a sports swimsuit. Only one girl called him Drakuen, and that was Lavinia. "What are you doing here, Lavinia?" Draco had sensed the girl coming, but was surprised to actually see her here. This was the boys' bathroom, and the only boy in this house was Draco. Because this was the boys' bathroom, Draco and Kuroka were sure to have sex without some other girl coming in and discovering them in the act. Though Kuroka had suggested from time to time that they might try to do it in the girls' bathroom, Draco had refused instantly. He did not want to leave any trauma in the smaller girls. For a woman like Lavinia, she shouldn't be in the boys' room. At Draco's words, however, Lavinia bowed her head in confusion. It's all right if we're alone, isn't it? Lavinia responded with words that can be easily misunderstood. Draco, who after a few months of living with her daily could say he knew her quite well, knew that she did not understand what was wrong in this situation. Draco simply shrugged. If she did not mind, Draco would not complain about having a beautiful girl with a voluptuous body next to him. Now that Draco was paying more attention to Lavinia, he could not help but be stunned. If Draco were to make an honest choice and be completely objective, Lavinia was, without a doubt, the most beautiful girl in this building. Although Kuroka had the advantage of being a nekashu, as the ears and tail of a cat gave an extra appeal, she could not nearly match Lavinia's pure, ethereal beauty. Draco would not love Kuroka any less for this, as she was still a celestial beauty. Lavinia looked like she was coming from the pool, which was on the same floor as the baths, so her blonde hair and her bathing suit were wet. The wet suit clung to Lavinia's curves, making her beautiful figure even more erotic. Draco swallowed hard before asking, "Have you come to take a shower?" "Why else would I come?" Lavinia answered honestly with another question. A girl entering the boys' bathroom, where the only boy was bathing, could be hinting at a lot, especially considering how erotic Lavinia looked at the moment. It was easy to interpret Lavinia's actions as, "I've got my legs open for you." But Lavinia was so pure that she couldn't think of this. She'd probably come in here by mistake, and she hadn't even bothered when she'd seen Draco. We are close friends, or Draco is a good person, is what Lavinia had thought. "So, what are you doing in your swimsuit?" "Oh, that's right." Without worrying about Draco, Lavinia took off her bathing suit. As it was a one-piece bathing suit, Lavinia had to remove it from top to bottom. As it was wet, Lavinia had some difficulty taking off her bathing suit. This was problematic for her, but extremely exciting for Draco. Unconsciously, Lavinia was giving Draco an erotic striptease. This is bad. Draco didn't know if he'd be able to keep this up for long. Lavinia had barely managed to get her swimsuit down to the area around her navel. Draco could only describe what his eyes were seeing with the word incredible. Those heavenly breasts, which were even bigger than Kuroka's, hung seductively. The pink nipples seemed to be screaming at Draco, "I want you to draw milk from us," and Draco was willing to do so. Lavinia lifted one leg, drawing Draco's attention to it. Lavinia's snow-white skin was as beautiful as she was. Tender and delicate, Draco was sure that a light pat would change the color of that skin to crimson red. Only one leg remained for Lavinia to be completely naked. A strip of cloth covered Draco from the sight of the witch's lower lips. This was the perfect moment when someone interrupted the protagonist of an anime harem from enjoying the moment. But this was not an anime harem. This was a hentai harem. Lavinia lifted her other leg and finally finished taking off her bathing suit. She left her entire body naked, which Draco was enjoying without hesitation. She had undressed in front of Draco. Why shouldn't he look? Again, any other boy who didn't know Lavinia would surely think she had dirty intentions about all this. She was too innocent to consider that what she was doing was seductive and erotic. How was practice today? Lavinia sat next to Draco again after leaving her bathing suit in a laundry basket, which already contained Draco's clothes. Rainier won against Cookie, but lost to Tobio. Draco summed up what happened to Lavinia. "Ah, Tobias won?" Draco had to suppress his laughter when he heard the nickname Lavinia had given Tobio. It sounded like she was talking about her dog when she referred to young accused. Yes, he has resorted to strategy to defeat her. Of course, other factors have also played a part, but the strategy has been the most important. Lavinia nodded with a happy smile. It's good to know they're getting so much better. They seemed so lost when we first found them. It was so painful to see Tobio so desperate because of what Shay was suffering. Yes, that was true. When Draco first found Tobio, he was mentally dead. Accused was a boy who had lost everything, so he had no reason to go on living. Knowing that there was a chance that his childhood friend was still alive was what had motivated the boy to act. And Draco knew that it was the only motivation the boy had to keep moving forward. "Dra Kuin, have you finished cleaning yourself?" "No, I was just getting started when you arrived." "Ah, I have a plan." Lavinia raised her arm excitedly. She seemed to be very pleased with herself for having discovered an incredible idea. Yes, I'll clean you first, and you'll clean me later. Lavinia was speaking with confidence. Why? Draco forced himself to ask Lavinia as he swallowed hard. When she had made her statement, she had bowed to Draco, giving him a full view of the mountain paradise. Well, you've already started bathing, so you should be the first to finish. Don't worry, you can help me later. Sigh, okay. Lavinia was so happy and energetic to hear Draco's answer that the boy knew he had done the right thing. It wasn't as if Draco had accepted because he had high expectations of this bath. I'll start with your back. Lavinia grabbed a cloth and knelt behind Draco. She pushed Draco's back slightly, causing him to bend over so that she could clean him more easily. Dearkin has a wide back. Lavinia muttered absently as she ran the cloth over Draco's back. Draco would definitely have responded to that comment, but he was too focused on enjoying the feel of Lavinia's breasts touching his back. It was a soft sensation, and it was especially exciting to feel Lavinia's nipples poking at her back. Draco was already erect since Lavinia had done that little striptease, but now his little brother had become a dragon spear at full power. Lavinia, how is Valerie doing? Draco had to be distracted, or he'd end up forcing himself on Lavinia. Kuroka had given him permission to form a harem, but Draco was sure she would despise him if he raped Lavinia. Damn it. Even he would despise himself if he hurt such a pure soul. In the end, he had ended up thinking of another blonde girl of transcendent beauty. Like Lavinia, Valerie also had a Longinus. She's getting better. Valerie had no idea what she could do with her sacred gear, as she had never used it for anything other than contacting the dead. Her brother had not informed her of anything, so this was a normal thing. Marius Teeps, Valerie's half-brother, had already started experimenting with Valerie when Mordred rescued her. As a result, she had become a girl who barely spoke, and when she did, she had a vicious tongue. The only person who had really managed to get close to Valerie had been Lavinia, and it seemed that she was now starting to open up more to Chiron. Those two girls were, without a doubt, the purest of all of them, so it made sense that she would be able to open up Valerie's frozen heart. Actually, I can't help her much with her sacred gear. All Longinus are different, and they have their unique abilities. It was thanks to my teacher that I was able to control mine better. Lavinia continued to explain while she was washing Draco's back. She seemed to be putting detail into every point of Draco's back, as if she were recording them in her mind. As someone gifted with a Longinus, I could only give you one piece of advice. To realize the full potential of a Longinus, you have to consider it a part of yourself. Although it's more specific advice for Longinus like Toby's and mine, it also applies to others. Unification? It was the first time Draco had heard this explanation. He thought that a sacred gear grows exponentially depending on the wishes of its user, the limit of the user, and the limit of sacred gear itself. The difference between the Longinus and the other sacred gears was that they knew no limit, or the limit was too high compared to the other sacred gears. That's right. The real way to manipulate a sacred gear, which is your alter ego, is to sympathize with it, to resonate with it. Not just in the body, but you have to become one from the heart and soul. In the dark depths of sacred gear, it is said that if, and only if, you can reach it, then you will find its true form. Lavinia had finished with her back and had begun to wash Draco's arms. I seem to know a lot about this subject, but, to tell you the truth, I can't skillfully control my own sacred gear either. In order to be truly competent with my sacred gear, if I investigate the truth to integrate with it, I will come to understand the puppet. I should be the one controlling the puppet, that princess, but the truth is the princess is not some kind of puppet. That's how it feels at least, and it's pretty scary. Although I've learned magic, my fear of the power that has been lodged within me since I was born has not diminished in the slightest. A mixture of pain and fear escaped Lavinia's voice. Draco was sure that something had happened related to her sacred gear in the past, and this had affected Lavinia. A sacred gear may seem like a blessing, but there are many cases where it is a curse. Issei was the clearest example of this. If Rias had not reincarnated him, his life would have ended with his date with Rainier. And all because he had sacred gear inside him. Draco had already received Issei's fate point, so the events of the future were going to change. Or at least, Issei's involvement in events was going to be different. Lavinia, what is your relationship with that old witch? Draco was referring to the bearer of the Longinus Incinerate anthem. Lavinia had informed them about her, but had not told them exactly what their relationship was. Draco thought this was a good time to ask, as it was going to be difficult to find a place alone with Lavinia. She's my enemy. Suddenly, Lavinia's face was practically glued to Draco's. She wasn't wearing anything, so she'd left everything in Draco's sight. My aim is to defeat her. Dracoin, I'm done with the back. I'm going to clean the front now. Lavinia had continued to wash Draco after their conversation was over. Finishing with Draco's back, she was now moving on to wash the front. Lavinia knelt in front of Draco, ready to begin her services. Can you spread your legs a little? It's a bit difficult like that. Draco had his legs closed to try and hide his erection. He didn't want to scare Lavinia. But Lavinia had already put her hands on Draco's legs before he could do or say anything, and she was using force to open them. Sigh. Just go with the flow, Draco. Ha! A gasp escaped Lavinia's mouth when she saw Draco's spear. He had been hiding his weapon between his legs, so Lavinia couldn't see it. But as Lavinia had opened them, the spear had stood upright and had almost hit Lavinia's face. Draco was surprised. Was Lavinia blushing? Lavinia was looking intently at Draco's spear. Her warm breath brushed past his cock, causing a pleasant chill down Draco's back. Lavinia seemed to have gone into some sort of trance. She didn't take her eyes off Draco's cock. She seemed to be obsessed with it. Lavinia, while Draco appreciated the view Lavinia was offering him, having a girl look at your cock up close but doing nothing was a bit awkward. Ah, yes. I'm going to wash you now. Lavinia got closer to Draco. Draco's spear was buried among Lavinia's huge mountains, which were leaning on Draco's abdominals. The direct contact between the two was making Lavinia's blush to deepen. Draco thought Lavinia was an innocent girl concerning sexual activities, but it seemed that this was not entirely the case. She didn't mind getting naked in front of Draco, and he thought she could do it with any guy. But what if this wasn't so? What if Lavinia would only get naked in front of Draco and not another boy? Those thoughts started to cross Draco's mind. Meanwhile, Lavinia had already begun to wipe Draco's chest. She did so carefully, and she took her time to feel the boy's muscles. Lavinia liked Draco? That was the question on Draco's mind. He wasn't sure, but there was one other thing he was sure of. If this went on, he was going to end up attacking Lavinia. Stop! Draco grabbed Lavinia's arm. This could not go on. Draco was going to end up doing what he was going to regret later. Lavinia's arm that Draco was holding shook. Have I done something wrong? Lavinia's face was very pitiful. Her eyes were red, and tears were threatening to fall. Draco just received X 1000 cuteness damage. No, you're doing excellent, too good if I'm honest. I haven't had such a satisfying bath in a long time. Regardless of the baths where I ended up having sex with Kuroka, of course. Is that so? Lavinia looked away immediately. The blush was now up to her ears. She seemed to be very happy because of Draco's praise. But you haven't finished yet, have you? Huh? But I've already cleaned up. No, not everything. Lavinia tilted her head to the side. She had washed Draco's back and front, while Draco had already washed his legs before Lavinia arrived. Let me guide you. Draco held Lavinia's hand up to his crotch. Yeah. Lavinia gave a little shriek. Were you going to wash me? This part here has to be clean too. Yes, Draco and Lavinia had agreed to wash each other. It wasn't fair if she left a part of his body unwashed, was it? Draco had Lavinia wrap her fingers around his cock. Ah! Draco let out a satisfying sigh. He released his hand, hoping that Lavinia would do the rest of the work herself. Actually, Lavinia was very confused at the time and didn't know what to do. She knew that sex was the necessary activity to make babies, but she hardly knew more than that. The male reproductive system, the penis, went into the female reproductive system, the vagina, and left its seed inside the woman. That was all Lavinia knew about sex. She knew nothing else. She had never even seen a penis before, so this was the first time she had seen one. Lavinia didn't understand why she was so ashamed at this moment. What Draco had said was true. She had to wash the whole body, because then he was going to wash her. Draco's hands touching every part of her body. Lavinia suddenly felt even more embarrassed. What was this feeling that was pounding inside her? Why was her heart racing? She hadn't felt so nervous since her Longinus had appeared in her parents' room when Lavinia was little. She was frightened at the time because she thought the doll might hurt them. But Lavinia didn't feel fear at this time. This was something she had never felt before. Lavinia started to clean Draco's cock. She put her hand down and was surprised to see the skin coming down with it, leaving the glands exposed. Lavinia was amazed to see that men and women were so different. "It's shaking," Lavinia exclaimed on her inside. Lavinia pulled up again and once more down. She repeated the movement several times, hoping that the cock would tremble once more. Lavinia was like a little girl playing with her new toy. Lavinia was becoming frustrated. She wanted to see the dick shake again, as it had brought an amusing tingle to her palm. Lavinia began to increase the speed with which she repeated her movements. It didn't take long when Lavinia felt a change in Draco's dick. It was starting to grow. Not only that, but she had also noticed that a sticky liquid was starting to come out of the tip of the glands. "Dearkin, what's this?" Draco was amazed. Lavinia was a natural talent for handjobs. Her slender fingers maintained an upward rhythm that was bringing Draco closer to ejaculation. He didn't know whether to cry or laugh when he saw Lavinia's frown or her frustrated face. He didn't know what she was waiting for, but he wasn't going to stop her movements either. "It's called pre-seminal fluid. You have to clean that up too, or I may have to shower again." Lavinia nodded seriously and took the cloth to clean up the semen, but Draco was not going to let her clean it up with that. "Stop! You can't use the cloth or your hands. That liquid can't stain anything." Lavinia frowned. She began to think, but she had not stopped the rhythm of her hands. What could she use if she could not use either hand or the cloth? The tongue. Lavinia could lick that liquid and swallow it. If she did so, then nothing would be stained. Having reached that solution, Lavinia licked Draco's glands. She didn't stop until she was sure that all the pre-seminal fluid had been successfully cleaned up. The liquid tasted curious, though Lavinia found it quite appealing. She didn't know it, but a dragon semen has a greater amount of nutrients than any other food. The pre-seminal liquid did not have such a vast amount of nutrients, but it was also high-quality food. But then she realized that some of that liquid had fallen down the meat stick. Lavinia couldn't leave it like that. She had to clean it up. Lavinia ran her tongue through all those places where there was still liquid. By the time she cleaned the entire meat stick, more pre-seminal fluid had come out of the glands. Once again, Lavinia was beginning to get frustrated. If she cleaned the glands, the meat stick would get stained, and vice versa. Soon she found a solution. Lavinia swallowed Draco's cock. If she had both inside her, there was no way she wouldn't clean Draco's cock. Yes, she was a natural genius. Lavinia was pleasantly surprised when she felt the tremor in Draco's cock again. She began to repeat the movements she was making with her hands, but this time using her mouth. With sounds of slurp slurp, Lavinia was giving Draco a blowjob. She didn't know what a blowjob was, so she was doing it unconsciously. And Draco was very close to climaxing. Lavinia was surprised when Draco's cock grew back. It was so big that she had to be careful not to bite it with her teeth. Draco put a hand on Lavinia's head. She looked down at him, but she didn't stop her movements. "Lavinia, listen to me. A lot of tasty liquid is going to come out now. Do you understand me? You have to swallow it all." "Oh gee, Cogs." Lavinia nodded as best she could, though she was not well understood. Draco at least had understood what she meant when Lavinia didn't stop her movements. Draco felt the charge build up in his cock. He was about to ejaculate. "Here it comes. I'm going to let it all out." Draco forced his cock into Lavinia's mouth. She felt pain, but she didn't stop it. Lavinia felt the liquid leave Draco's cock and enter her throat, and she forced herself to swallow it all. It was difficult, but she had to do it because it was Draco who had ordered her to do it. Lavinia noticed that this liquid was different than before. This one was thicker and much tastier. Draco could have forced her to drink it, but Lavinia was enjoying it too. She was enjoying the taste, of course. Draco finished ejaculating and let Lavinia retire. A thread of saliva was hanging from Draco's cock when it came out of Lavinia's mouth. "Delicious," Lavinia muttered. Draco decided to ignore that comment. "You've done a good job, Lavinia." "Yes? I'm so happy." Lavinia showed Draco a beautiful, honest, and happy smile. He was captivated by this angel at once. The eyes with which Draco looked at her had changed completely. Had Lavinia always been so beautiful? Draco rose from his seat. "Sit down, Lavinia. It's my turn to wash you." Lavinia nodded and sat down where Draco was sitting before. As Lavinia had done before, Draco knelt behind her. He took a different cloth than the one Lavinia was using, as it would not be very hygienic to use the same cloth for two people, and began to rinse Lavinia's back. Lavinia's skin was soft and white as the moon. Draco was enjoying her skin. He carefully washed her back, making sure that not a single spot was left unwashed. He ran his fingers down Lavinia's neck and felt the girl's hair stand up with his touch. Draco's touch was making Lavinia feel strange. She enjoyed her baths, but the sensations she was feeling in this one were different. Lavinia didn't know that the word she was looking for was eroticism. An erotic atmosphere was spreading through the bath. When Lavinia was leading the bath, the atmosphere was pure. But now that it was Draco's turn, the atmosphere was taking on an erotic tinge. Both the dragon and Lavinia were starting to get hotter than they already were. Draco climbed up to her shoulders, massaging them gently. He could only curse the cloth internally for standing between Lavinia's skin and his fingers. Draco reached down over Lavinia's left shoulder, running the cloth down her delicate left arm. He carefully wiped the delicate fingers of her left hand. Then he repeated the whole process with the right side. "Lavinia, can you stand up for a moment? I have to clean your bottom." "No need, I can wash that." Lavinia refused at once. For Draco to clean that place for her was too embarrassing. Funny, she hadn't felt so embarrassed when she was washing Draco's cock. Well, anyone would be ashamed if someone told you they were going to wash your anus. No, I have to wash everything. Didn't we agree on that?" "Yes, but..." "There are no buts. My heart will not rest in peace if I do not keep our agreement. My code of honor is always to keep my word." "Is that so?" Lavinia still had doubts, but in the end, she granted Draco's request. She rose slightly, exposing not only the small hole in her anus, but the lower lips that formed her vagina. Draco had to restrain himself from playing directly with Lavinia's vagina. That was a part he had to wash thoroughly, but he was going to leave it for later. For now, Draco had to do anal cleaning. That girl was in the upper grades of primary school when Suzaku Himejima met her. She was a child who had been hated by her own relatives since birth. Suzaku had been meeting this child secretly on occasion for several months. On that day, too, Suzaku had lied about going to a Shinto shrine associated with the Himejima family, and instead went to a secret location where the child had been housed. That place was heavily guarded, which meant that neither ordinary people nor ordinary practitioners could simply appear there. But Suzaku knew how to overcome those defenses. This had nothing to do with her being the most talented woman in her family since childhood, but was because she had been taught how to get past those defenses. She only had to follow a path in an infinitely straight line without escaping. No matter how many times she reached the same turn, Suzaku only had to make a special hand seal with her hand to keep going. After several minutes of walking, she arrived at a single-story house that was not in its best condition. The house had once served as a shrine, but had been abandoned for a long time. As she entered the grounds, Suzuka could see a girl playing alone in the distance, drawing on the garden floor. She was a little girl about 7 or 8 years old with a shiny black ponytail. The girl turned when she noticed a presence behind her. Seeing that it was Suzuku, she ran toward it with a smile that lit up her entire face. And, just like that, she plunged into Suzuka's chest. "Suzukane-sama." Suzuka hugged the girl, who had jumped on her chest with love. "Akino, were you drawing something? Did you memorize the exorcism technique Shirioba-sama taught you?" When Suzuka asked this with a smile, little Akino stuck out her tongue and said, "It's okay if I memorize it with Suzune-sama." For some reason, Suzuka found that gesture personally relaxing. Suzaku and Akino were very much alike, although that was to be expected. Akino was Suzaku's first cousin. Akino's mother was Suzuka's mother's younger sister, so they had strong blood ties. "Oh my, Suzuka-chan. You have arrived." A woman appeared on the porch. She also had a face very similar to the other two girls. She was Suzuka's aunt and Akino's mother. "Shuri Obisama, I ask you to forgive my intrusion." Shuri, pleased with Suzuka's visit, greeted her with a smile. Along with her Aunt Shuri, Suzaku had tried to test whether the young Akino could adapt to the techniques handed down by the Himejima clan. The primary foundations were the 5 phases, the attributes of the 5 elements: fire, water, wood, metal, and earth. Everything related to these 5 phases is canon, although it has not expanded much on this. I am one of those who think that Naruto's system of elements is much simpler than this one. Still, I will have to do some research to be able to develop it better in the future. Shuri has not died, and Akino has not become devil, so she will learn these powers as well. The Himejima, because of their belief in gods belonging to the Hai no Kagutsuchi no Kami lineage, were a family that mainly manifested supernatural powers related to fire. Suzaku and Shuri were no exception. However, Akino demonstrated her overwhelmingly talent with lightning instead of fire. No doubt this was because she was the daughter of a certain person, and that was unfavorable information for those connected to the Himejima. And then, there was one more point that Shuri had told her. Akino had a constitution that was favorable to Oni. This was something that Akino carried inside her body that was identical to her mother, Shuri, or so Suzaku believed. For the Himejima clan, there were numerous instances where those who lacked the divine protection of fire were forcibly exiled. Akino, in particular, because of her different bloodline, was viewed as nothing less than a disgrace by Himejima's superiors. If only she had a talent for fire, or possibly the divine grace of the Hai no Kagutsuki line, it could be an entirely different story. This result had brought much pain to Suzaku, as well as to Shuri. Akino will never be welcomed by the Himejima. Suzaku and Shuri looked after Akino, who was playing alone in the garden. Suddenly, Shuri spoke to Suzaku. "Suzaku-chan, if anything ever happened to me..." After saying that, Shuri shook her head. "No, please forget it. You're the next generation of family heads, being elected by the Himejima family. I won't let the matter that concerns us affect you." Suzaku took Shuri's hand. "Obisama, please don't talk like that." She said it clearly, with a determined look. If I become the head of the family, I intend to make reforms so that Obisama and Akino can return to the family. Also, I've decided that I want to do everything I can to get all the exiles back into the family. After all, is it not sad that even though we have the same blood running through our veins, we are discriminated against because of small differences in ability? In fact, Suzu from birth had been born under the divine protection of Hai no Kagutsuki and was compatible with Suzu, the sacred beast that ruled the Himejima family, and as such was the rare existence even within the family that was allowed to be named with that same kanjis. From birth, she was a child whose future as head of the family was destined. The young mind of Suzaku, however, resented the way her relatives had handled things. Though they were not blessed with the power of fire, they were still kinsmen in whose veins the same blood flowed. Banishing them like this only created feelings of resentment towards such arbitrariness. "When I am head of the family, I will not be like all the successive heads of the family have been." This is what he decided in her heart, even if it promised to be a thorny path. Shuri brushed the cheek of Suzaku. "You are very kind, Suzaku-chan. You are a kind girl, not like someone from Himejima. No matter how many painful things happen, even if that dream changes, your kind heart will never change." As Shuri embraced her with a trembling voice, Suzaku couldn't understand at that moment what her aunt was saying. The only thing she could perceive was Shuri's warmth. Several years later, her Aunt Shuri was attacked by powerful hostile assassins who resented the fallen angels, and she lost her life. Or that is what should have happened, if not for the fact that someone interfered with that assassination attempt. Ironically, it was the day Suzu underwent the ceremony of the inheritance of the sacred beasts. She learned the details the next day, after the ceremony was completely over. Barakiel's friends, a dragon and a Nakomata, saved the lives of Barakiel's family and his student. Suzaku knew that Sue was involved in this. How could they have so many details if not for the fact that they had been spying on them throughout the process? She was upset, but there was nothing she could do at the moment. Suzaku visited the house where Shuri and Akino used to live a few days later, but it had already been completely abandoned. She swore to herself on that day that she would reform the Himejima. Once I become the head of the family, I will reform the Himejima. If it's for that reason, I will imbue this body with hellfire no matter what the discomfort. So, Akino, Shuriobasama, when the time comes for you to return, surely, and now, the 17-year-old Himejima, Su, carried the same desire as she had since those days when she stood before the destroyed house of Shuri. After so long, I will be able to see you again, Akino. And Draco, I have to thank you properly. So this Suzuka Himejima wants to meet you next Saturday. That's right. She has information regarding the remaining fiends. Kuroka and Draco were sharing a bathroom. Lavinia only went to the pools once or twice a week, so she only used the bathrooms on the lower floors on those days. And who are you taking with you, nya? Kuroka was sitting on Draco's lap, though she was making suspicious bounces. To all those connected with the four fiends. Well, it's not like I'm going to turn anyone else away if you want to come. The meeting place is a nearby town, so we can take a walk and have some entertainment. Oh, yeah, I'm also bringing little Akino with me. Is that so? Kuroka was using Draco as a chair while riding his cock. This was the position they used when discussing serious matters. Draco felt Kuroka's vagina tighten, squeezing his cock to the fullest. The sensation was infinitely pleasurable, and he was close to ejaculating. Kuroka felt it as well, and increased the speed of her movements. I'm coming. Me too. Naya. Draco's cock reached the bottom of Kuroka's vagina, reaching the uterus. He let his entire load enter Kuroka's interior, and it was no small load. Kuroka let herself fall onto Draco. The cream pie had satisfied her, for the moment. Come to think of it, Natsum and Lavinia are going, aren't they? Kuroka asked. That's my intention. Akino, Tobio, Cookie, Natsum, Lavinia, and Valina. They are all coming. It will be a small reward for all the effort they are putting into their training. Draco responded. This is the perfect opportunity, nya. You have to take Lavinia and Natsum shopping and improve your relationship with them. Draco sighed. Was this really the time to talk about this? Aren't you coming? Me? No. I can't leave Chiron alone with Mordred. Who knows what state my pretty little sister will end up in if I don't have my eyes on her. And before you say anything, no, Chiron is not going with you. I don't want her involved in any trouble yet. Draco knew there was no way to convince Kuroka if she had decided anything. All right, I'll do my best. Though it would be easier if you or Mordred joined us, in case anything unexpected happened. Draco knew his own limitations. With his skills, Draco was confident he could take on ultimate class beings. Still, he had no confidence in winning against Mao class or Cadre class. The difference in statistics was too great. Talk to Mordred. I've already told you everything I have to say. Next Saturday, Chiron and I will have a movie session with Valerie. Maybe we should invite that little pervert and Rainier. Nya. Kuroka shouted in surprise when Draco shoved his cock back in. It seemed the dragon had recovered and was ready for another round. Cookie and Valina didn't seem very interested in this trip, and even Tobio had been surprised. Lavinia, Natsum, and had been responsible for convincing the three of them not to fall behind. As they walked towards the shopping district, Natsum stretched as he complained of muscle pain. Ow, wow, I had intended to do a good exercise, but the side effects are too hard. Barakil-sensei is planning to go further than the Spartans. Akino could not allow them to mess with her father, so she responded quickly to Natsum. Dad's training is perfect, almost perfect. Dad is doing his best to give you the best education and preparation. All the training is meticulously prepared so that you can survive in this world. Akino was speaking from experience. She had come very close to death, as she could not defend herself when her father's enemies attacked her. Now, she was much stronger than before, and with her holy lighting, she could face fallen angels with 3 pairs of wings, or even 4 pairs of wings. Of course, she had her own limits, being that she could only use that move 3 times before losing consciousness. Well, it generates resistance, that's for sure. I was even surprised when I realized I had the stamina to run 10 kilometers. As Cookie had said, Barrakeel's training had given the group incredible stamina. For him, though, the training was more noticeable since he had an athletic background from before. Compared to before he went to Nephilim, it was clear that his arm circumference had increased, and even his pectoral and abdominal muscles were marked above his clothes. Still, his body could not compare to Draco's. As expected of a dragon, his body was perfect once it took on its human form. "What are we going to do today?" Lavinia asked. Lavinia was wearing. She was wearing her usual hat and magic cape despite being on an outing. It was not unusual for her to be the center of attention of virtually everyone. Lavinia seemed to be cosplaying right now, although she didn't really have any other clothes to wear. "Well, we could do quite a lot of things, don't you think? For example, buy you new clothes?" Draco replied with a smile as he squeezed her hand. Somehow, Draco and Lavinia had informed the rest that they were officially dating during a dinner party days ago. Kuroka had also taken the opportunity to report that she accepted the relationship between Draco and Lavinia, but with the condition that Kuroka was the first wife. Draco had convinced Lavinia to come in, saying that this was to be their first date. "Hey, clothes? But this suit is perfect for magic." Natsum interrupted before Lavinia could continue. "Yes, clothes? For a young girl, that kind of look is more than bad. Not being fashionable is completely unacceptable. Tuja-san, help me pick out clothes for Lavinia. Together we'll find some nice clothes for this girl." "Biba." Natsum took Lavinia's hand and whispered something in her ear. Maybe she thought Draco couldn't hear her. Lavinia blushed when she heard what Natsum had to say, and gave Draco a quick glance before dodging his eyes almost immediately. Lavinia finally nodded and followed Natsum willingly. "Tuja-san, come on." "Huh? Why, yes." Being dominated by the vigor of Natsum, it could not resist and ended up going with them. "Everyone, let's go shopping," Natsum said as she pointed to the business district. Shopping was not an idea everyone agreed with, especially the boys, since they knew how heavy girls could get when they went to look at clothes. Valina was also one of those who didn't like this idea of shopping. "Sigh, at least I'll be able to have lunch in a ramen shop. I heard they have a delicious specialty with a lot of seafood soup." "Yes, yes." Draco stroked Valina's head as he spoke. Akino, for her part, happily followed the girls. "Hey, Tobio, how's your relationship with Essie going?" Draco asked him when the girls were separated by a considerable distance. "What relationship? Sae and I are just friends." Although Tobio responded, it was clear that this was not the case because of the blush on his face. Honestly, Draco did not think Tobio was the princess type, considering how badass he was in the LN. "Don't play dumb. Being embarrassed is going to be bad for you. Listen to me and accompany Essie while we're shopping. I'll take care of Natsum and Lavinia." Draco had a secondary mission that Kuroka had given him. He had to strengthen his relationship with Lavinia and Natsum. Therefore, Essie was getting in the way of his mission. For Draco, this was an opportunity to advance his relationship with the two girls. He couldn't let other people get in the way of his mission. Tobio nodded immediately. It seemed that Draco was not the only one who wanted to improve his relationship with a girl today. "Oi, dragon of ramen. Don't you eat ramen at home, too?" "That's why you're beyond help, same Jima cookie. It's a mistake to equate homemade ramen with commercial ramen. For the domestic ramen, there is the feeling of security that it's ready to eat, while for the shop ramen, the quality is totally different because you eat it in a shop. Isn't it just that you like to eat children's lunches, Raider-sensei? Although children's lunches are also good, as expected, the ramen of a store..." "Wait, don't call me Raidra." Sure, Lysidra. You could hear Cookie and Valina coming and going behind them. But that wasn't of Draco's interest at this point. Natsum and Lavinia were his focus at the moment. As they walked around the stores, the four girls, Valina was a girl too, but she wasn't happy at all, were happy as they looked at the clothes as much as they liked them. It was the first time Draco had gone shopping for clothes since he was reincarnated as a dragon. To tell you the truth, buying clothes was unnecessary for him. All right, clothes for VH-on too. Lavinia had caught her taste for buying clothes, and now she wanted to buy clothes for little Valina. I really don't. All right. You don't like girls' clothes? There's no way Valina Lucifer wears clothes that make her look weak. Besides, they wouldn't look good on me. Valina mumbled the last part quietly, but loud enough for the rest to hear what she said. It's okay. Just leave it all to your One-San. She'll get something that you'll look really nice in, Lavinia said cheerfully. She seemed to be having a lot of fun. Lavinia-san is right. I'm sure you'd look very pretty in women's clothes, Aquino said with confidence. Hearing the two girls' words of confidence, Valina could only end up nodding. Not only Lavinia, but Natsum was also dragging Valina. They seemed very determined to find women's clothing for the Lucifer. The boys were watching from a distance. Draco and Tobio had nothing to buy, but Cookie had bought a few pieces of training equipment, like weights and such. Now, everyone was waiting for the girls to finish shopping. It was true that Draco wanted to accompany the girls to improve their relationship, as did Tobio, but both had been kicked out by the girls. They said they were ruining the mood or something. Well, it wasn't so bad socializing with the guys either. Accuse? What? What have you been doing with Tuja this week, huh? What? At Tobio's request, Cookie made an obscene hand signal. This has to be it, right? That kind of relationship, right? Wouldn't it be reasonable to say you've been living that kind of lifestyle every day? Cookie had his point. Tobio practically lived with Essie, so it would not be surprising to consider their relationship to have advanced dangerously. But, as soon as he understood its meaning, Tobio's face turned red. No, SAE, and I don't have that kind of relationship. We won't. Won't you do it? Does that mean I can aim for SAE too? Kuroka, Lavinia, and Natsum are hot, but I can't deny that Essa has her appeal too. Draco came into the conversation to taunt Tobio. You can't have her. SAE is mine. Tobio responded almost immediately. Oh, but you didn't say that. I mean, we won't do it for the time being. Making fun of Tobio was fun. Not as funny as teasing a beautiful girl, but it was the best thing Draco could do right now. But you should know that's similar to reaching for the sky. The pleasure you get is incomparable to the pleasure your right hand can give you. Draco gestured sagely as he spoke. It seemed he was explaining the meaning of life to Tobio, though he was not far from it. Oh, it seems Draco-sama is quite experienced. Why don't you tell us about it? Cookie seemed quite interested in the subject. I'm sorry, I can't explain it in words. Come on, don't be like that. How does a threesome feel? And a foursome? When I test it, I'll let you know. I've only fucked Kuroka. I've barely got past the kisses with Natsum and Lavinia. Even if it's just that, I'm sure that Hayadu is very jealous of you. You even made out with Natsum, and you're not even dating? Draco shrugged. It was not as if he had to explain his personal life to Cookie. Putting that aside, Toju is really cute. I don't remember noticing her when we're in Ryukyu, but she sure is a nice girl. I'm not aiming at her or anything, so don't worry. I was simply expressing thoughts from my own perspective. To me, right now, girls are kind of... Cookie made a bitter face. It seems he has his own bitter history with girls. The boys continued to talk for a short time. They spoke about Tobio and his desire to become stronger, about future goals, and several other things. Are you finished? Have you taken your... Draco turned away when he felt a familiar presence, but was utterly stunned by what he saw. DRing. These are the clothes Natsum and Shay chose. A blonde-haired girl in a light blue one-piece dress. Lavinia was there. Long, straight blonde hair that seemed to shine like silk, blue eyes that seemed transparent, long, white arms and legs that were well-proportioned. Although the light blue piece was simple, it had brought out the characteristics of a young lady to the fullest. As she wore clothes far removed from her usual pointed hat and tunic that formed her cosplay as a magical child. Even Draco, who had seen her naked and played with her body, was completely captivated by what he was seeing. Lavinia's face was unusually red, and her arms and legs were restless. Somehow, Lavinia had an embarrassed look, which made her look even more beautiful. It's embarrassing if you keep looking at me like that. Draco came to his senses with Lavinia's words. A slight smile formed on his face, and instead of looking away as Lavinia had requested, he continued to admire the beauty of his bride. Draco approached her and placed his hands around her back. He couldn't resist anymore and kissed her lips softly. "You look incredibly beautiful." Lavinia hid her gaze from Draco and buried her head in his chest. Kissing in public in front of so many people was a little too much for her, but Lavinia couldn't stop a smile from forming on her face. Meanwhile, Draco had to endure the piercing gaze of 3 other girls. Was this the bad part about forming a harem? Of course, she looks beautiful. Look, you all bowed down to the blonde-haired goddess. Offer her your homage. And then don't forget to thank me. Natsum seemed very proud of her creation. Mind you, Draco saw her eyebrow tremble for a moment and felt a sense of jealousy emanating from it. Yes, I have to thank you properly for choosing such a beautiful dress for my beautiful girlfriend. Draco released a hand from Lavinia's waist and wrapped it around Natsum's waist, drawing her into his embrace as well. With a girl on each arm, Draco kissed Natsum's lips. What are you doing? Natsum blushed deeply as she tried to separate herself from Draco. Draco would not let her go, however. Come on, you just have to obediently accept your reward. Draco laughed lightly as he kissed Natsum again. This time, he did not finish the kiss quickly and thrust his tongue into Natsum's mouth. She seemed to give up on resisting his advances. She ended up wrapping her own arms around Draco's neck and kissing him proactively. When they parted, a thread of saliva still held their tongues together. Lavinia called out to Draco in an inexpressive voice. She had an equally expressionless face, but Draco knew what she wanted. Leaning over to Lavinia, Draco kissed her passionately. Lavinia, who didn't want to be left behind by Natsum, also kissed him proactively. Why did Lavinia accept Natsum so easily? Well, Kuroka had had a long talk with the 2 girls. Lavinia wasn't the only one who had bought a new dress, as Valina had also done so. She had ended up buying a white jacket, a girl's jacket, and a black skirt. She was still wearing her scarf, and there was no way to take it back. You look beautiful too, Valina. It was surprising to see that Valina had agreed to wear a skirt, so Draco spared no effort in complimenting her. She was a pretty girl, although she was still small. You could see she had a lot of potential. Se, Natsum, and Akino had all ended up buying nothing. Typical of girls, to spend a lot of time looking at clothes and then not buy anything. After a few minor adjustments to Lavinia's attire, they all headed for lunch at a ramen shop where Valina wanted to eat. The silver-haired girl started to give lectures about ramen, but that was something they were already used to. They kept visiting shops which were not for clothes. On the way, some boys tried to approach the girls, but one look from Draco was enough to make them pee themselves. In the end, Lavinia and Natsum had ended up scolding Draco for over-intimidating all those boys. Still, the smiles on their faces betrayed them. There wasn't a girl who didn't feel happy when her boy got angry with other boys because of them. After they finished, they all went to a park in the center of town at Draco's request. And in the square, they ended up playing with Jean and Griffin. Tobio's big dog had been hiding in the shadows most of the time, while Griffin followed them from the air. Byakusa, on the other hand, did not leave Cookie's shoulder. Jean-chan, go! He threw a toy puck that they had just bought when they were shopping, and Jean chased after him, catching the puck with a high jump. Yeah, you too, Griffin? This time, Natsum threw a series of balls into the air. Griffin caught them with his claws. Se seemed to be very good with animals, as everyone around her. Even Byakusa had separated from Cookie to stand at Sae's feet. Cookie was lying on one of the park benches taking a nap. He looked exhausted from the shopping. Meanwhile, Tobio was sitting on a bench next to Cookie's, watching Se play with Jean and the others. Draco and Lavinia were sitting on a different bench a bit away from the rest. Lavinia leaned her body slightly against Draco's. Lavinia had a package in her hand. She opened it and took out a small ice cream. Do you want some? Of course. Draco took the ice cream with a smile. From the size of the box, Lavinia seemed to have bought ice cream for everyone. How I didn't know what flavor Dracoin likes. I brought vanilla. You could have asked me, you know? Draco stroked Lavinia's head with his free hand. I wanted it to be a surprise. Lavinia pouted. Seeing Lavinia's expression, Draco felt a burst of mode damage inside him. Although in reality, Draco's favorite flavor was nougat. But he wasn't going to complain about a surprise Lavinia had given him. But The vanilla ice cream tasted like strawberry. Draco decided to keep that last detail to himself. Vachan and Aikchan are having trouble at the ice cream shop. Well, Vachan has them, and Aikchan is trying to help her. Well, something like this was to be expected from the silver-haired girl. Even if she didn't care much for food, she was especially fussy about these things. Draco and Lavinia spent their time huddled together. Actually, this situation was quite pleasant for both of them. Diarquin, you wanted to know how I relate to the wizard we met at the Utsasimi Agency's hideout. If you don't mind, of course I'd like to know. Perhaps because it was a very personal issue for Lavinia, she hadn't told Draco about it. She seemed to have enough confidence in him now to talk to him about it. To begin with, one more time, I'll tell you the story of the people I'm chasing. Lavinia parted from Draco and looked at him with serious eyes. She had gone into business mode. Between the human world and the realms of other fantasy factions, there is the dimensional gap, and one of those realms is called the Land of Oz. It's a country of wizards where magical research is everything. It's the most important thing above anything else. The people who live there are the Wizards of Oz. Lavinia nodded at Draco's words. She went on to explain more. In this Oz, there are castles to the north, south, east, and west, all around the Emerald City where the chief wizard resides. And in those castles is where the most powerful wizards reside. This country of Oz was related to the children's story, The Wizard of Oz. Lavinia says with a frightening expression. The witch we found at the Utsasimi Agency hideout was the Wicked Witch of East Oz. To be precise, she's the second-generation Witch of the East. The Witch of the East, Augusta of the Purple Flame. That is the true identity of that old woman. The second generation, the first generation of the Wizard of the East, must have been crushed to death as a result of Dorothy being transferred to the land of Oz along with her house. Had the same thing happened in this world as in the story? It could be, but Draco wasn't sure. The mythologies on this world were slightly altered. Draco still didn't understand how Thor and Vidar were stronger than Odin on this world. But it wasn't easy to put all the mythologies on the same level of power either, so you could pretty much make sense of it all. In truth, I am also connected to Oz. Draco wasn't surprised by Lavinia's words. He expected something like that since she knew so much about Oz. The teacher who taught me magic was a wizard who lived in Oz. Glenda, the Witch of the South. Draco expected something like this. Glenda was one of the good wizards of Oz. In history, she was known as the Royal Wizard of Oz. She's the sorceress of all things magical and mysterious. So it wouldn't be surprising if Lavinia was so good at magic if it was Glenda who had taught her. Actually, Glenda was a very powerful character in the story. She was undoubtedly one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, of the wizards. Although Draco didn't know if he could trust that information right now. But why was Lavinia chasing the Wicked Witch of the East? Was it because she was Glenda's disciple? Lavinia was going to say something else, but something happened at that moment. A strange figure appeared in Draco's field of vision. The dragon was surprised, as he hadn't noticed it until he showed himself on the spot. The boy was directing his gaze at SAE and the others, but his attention was on Jean, Griffin, and Byakusa. Trouble. The boy seemed to be 17 or 18 years old. He was wearing a blue jacket and glasses of the same color. Next to Draco, Lavinia also had a stiff face. The boy approached SAE. "Hey, that's a pretty cat. Is it yours?" The boy asked SAE. As Byakusa was pressed to SAE's legs, he seemed to think she was his mistress. "Who the hell are you? Tisich, you're not a normal kid, are you?" The one who responded was Cookie. He seemed to have sensed the strange atmosphere as he slept, for he had risen and was now heading towards the boy with a keen eye. Of course, he was not a normal boy. Draco could sense that familiar aura in him. It did not exactly belong to him, but it was within him. Status inspection. Sairyu Kushihashi. Race, human. Status, normal. HP, 100 out of 100. MP, 1356/1356. Strength, 25. Defense, 15. Magic, 1534. Agility, 325. His statistics were very low. Well, He was a human, so he had physical limitations. But he was weak even for a trained human, physically speaking. But what about that level of absurd magic? Draco noticed a vital detail. Sairyu Kushihashi. Kushihashi is one of Japan's 5 major clans, and the sacred beast that protects them is Sairyu. That made more sense. The dragon aura, that absurd, magical power. It was all related to Sairyu, the Azure Dragon. Oh, you could guess that, huh? Sairyu confirmed that everyone was in the square, except for Valina and Akino, before he showed up. Nice to meet you, Shirakuma, Four Fiend, and Inugami-kun. I'm Kushihashi, Sairyu Kushihashi. And why are there so many people with the complex of Bond, James Bond? On guard, Natsum asked for confirmation. Kushihashi? You're part of the top 5 clans, right? It was evident that it was, so why ask such an obvious question? Yes, I'm practically the next chief of the Kushihashi clan. Although you may not believe me. No, we believe you. Draco got up and walked over to them. Oh, this seems to be the dragon coin I've been told about. Please to die. Draco summoned Gondiva and shot an arrow. He felt strange watching the arrow gain very powerful magical circuits when he created it. Without a doubt, the arrow was now on another level. The arrow pierced Sairyu's chest before he could react. He was a human being, so a normal attack could kill him. Did you kill him? Sae asked weakly. She was very pale. It is not every day you see a man suddenly killed by a friend. Hey, you didn't even know if he was hostile or not. Tobio complained. He was pale too, and cold sweat was running down his forehead. The two were not alone, as both Natsum and Cookie did not seem to digest the scene easily. They were just normal kids until 2 months ago, and I hadn't dealt with any murders yet that they remembered. Tobio had killed that Himejima, but he barely remembered what happened. Draco frowned. No, he's alive. He had not received any experience points, so Sairyu was still alive. The question was how? He soon knew his answer. Sairyu's body disappeared, turning into large petals that scattered everywhere. Exchange the petals for a tree trunk, and Draco would have doubted if he was in DxD or Naruto. Sairyu appeared in a place a short distance away. His clothing still had the hole created by the arrow, but he seemed undamaged, though you could see some blood near his mouth. It looks like I'm going to take this seriously. Even though he was so close to death, Sairyu flashed a bold smile in Draco's direction. Sairyu, wiping the blood from his mouth with his hand, began to make a symbol with his hands. Draco wasted no time in firing another arrow, but a shield appeared in front of Sairyu, protecting him from the blow. The shield was destroyed instantly, causing Sairyu to spit out a little more blood. A blue aura surrounded Sairyu's body, emitting an impressive dragon pressure. Even Draco felt pressured by this aura, which he was certain came from Sairyu. This was Tuki without a doubt. In the name of Jupiter, Kino Sirii / Mother Spirit, who carries the sun on the winds, carries it east. 4-3 blue and 4 green, am I cry? Draco did not wait for Sairyu to finish his enchantment. There was no doubt that what he was attempting was dangerous. He shot one arrow after another again. A total of 3 arrows in the time he was reciting his spell, all blocked by shields. Boom! Lightning struck next to Draco. This person was none other than Akino, who was ready to help Draco after feeling the fight. That's enough. Akino had not hesitated to use her holy lighting to intimidate Sairyu. Although now she only had 2 more attempts. I knew this was no ordinary outing. And to think that you were going to bring me to fight the next chief of one of the 5 major clans. Valina also appeared with Akino. The Valina-Kino couple wasn't exactly the most intimidating of all. Barakiel's daughter and disgrace of the Himejima, Akino, and the rumored vanishing dragon. Huh, this is really something. Kushihashi, Sairyu shrugged, but his fighting spirit did not diminish at all. But that voice called out from behind him. Simultaneously, sparks of fire danced across the square. Sairyu, stop this. Upon hearing that voice, Sairyu was surprised, and the fighting spirit, the blue aura that enveloped his body, was erased. From behind Sairyu, a single figure approached while wearing an aura of boiling flame. Those powerful flames, that face identical to Shuri and Akino. There was no doubt who that person was. Akino shivered slightly before rushing toward this person. Suzukane-sama. Inspect status. Suzaku Himejima. Race, human. Status, normal. HP, 117 out of 117. MP, 1456/1456. Strength, 16. Defense, 12. Magic, 1849. Agility, 73. Her magic power was even more terrifying than Saryu's. How was expected of the second strongest of all the 5 sacred beasts, only inferior to the Uryu Nikiri of this generation. That Uryu boy, for what Azazel has told Draco, was a real monster. You didn't let me have any fun? Suzaku. Saryu complained to Suzaku. He only wanted to see how strong the Shirakoma and Canis Lycaon were, and he would never have expected to be so close to death. Each and every one of the barriers Draco had destroyed had caused him great internal damage. Shirakoma sounds better than 4 fiends, so I will keep that name from now on. Suzaku ignored Saryu completely, all her attention on little Akino. Who would have thought that Akino, of all people, would be close to death when she was buried between a pair of huge boobs? Ironic, isn't it? You've grown so much, Akino. Sune-sama. I can't breathe. After hugging Akino a bit more, Suzaku stopped her and went over to Draco. She took his hand with affection. Draco, I am Suzaku Himejima. I'm very grateful for all you've done for my family. Suzaku's hand was warm, and she was totally sincere. She let go of Draco's hand, almost reluctantly, and moved closer to Tobio. Nice to meet you too, Tobio accused. I'm your second cousin, Himejima Suzu. Tobio was too stunned to respond. Not only Akino, but now another blood relative appeared. Natsum approached Draco and asked, Hey Draco, what's the adult version of Akino doing here? Draco let out a giggle. She is the next leader of the Himejima clan. My goal from the start was to meet her, even though I didn't expect this appetizer. Draco looked at Saryu. He was still thinking about whether or not he should kill that boy. At the very least, he was going to give him a lot of experience points. That is right. Saryu and I have come to discuss the remaining Shirakoma with Akatsuki's leader. I had only hoped to meet with Draco, but it was a pleasant surprise to find Tobio and Akino here. Well, would you be so kind as to join us? The first impression Suzaku had made on Draco was quite positive. Draco and the others, led by Suzaku and Saryu, left the business district and finally arrived at an office space in a huge building that towered above the rest. They traveled in limousines, which Suzaku had prepared in advance. As expected, the clans were not particularly poor. The group went up to the penthouse of the building, which was the location of the meeting. Specifically, the meeting was held in a Japanese-style room. In this Japanese-style room, Draco and the others were sitting next to Suzaku and Saryu, completely uninterrupted in their posture. Suzaku sitting so meticulously made it clear that the training she received on social norms was of a high standard. But Draco's attention was not on Suzaku at this time. A woman in her early 20s had been waiting for the group in the room before they arrived. Draco had not even been able to feel her aura until he was a few feet away from her. She was a tall girl, some 6 or 7 centimeters taller than Kuroka, and had a slender, well-developed body. She has shoulder-length raven black hair and striking silver-gray eyes. Without a doubt, she was extremely beautiful. In fact, she was so beautiful that Draco thought such beauty could only pertain to a goddess. Inspect status. Artemis. Race, divine spirit. Status. HP. MP. Strength. Defense. Magic. Agility. She was really a goddess. Draco tensed up. This was the second time he had tried to see someone's stats, and all of them were blocked, the first time being Tiamat. If she wanted to, she could kill everyone in the room easily. Draco was sure of that. Even if he used Agni Gandiva to his full potential, his most powerful attack, the rest would die from Draco's own attack. Even if Agni Gandiva was an attack at the level of a nuclear bomb, He was not sure if it could kill Artemis or not. What a beautiful big sister. What's your name? Aquino spoke before Draco could say anything. I am Artemis, goddess of the hunt. The goddess introduced herself calmly. Draco already knew this because she had read his status, but he was still surprised to find one of the Olympians here. What was one of the main goddesses doing here? Even Siryu was surprised. In fact, everyone showed a variety of reactions except Suzaku. It was evident that she was to blame for Artemis' presence. Artemis is my guest. She won't intervene in our meeting. She has her own business to attend to with Draco. Shit. How had Draco attracted the attention of Artemis or Olympus? Perhaps the gods noticed the use of Phoebus' catastrophe? But that was a bit absurd, wasn't it? Phoebus' catastrophe was a power from a completely different universe. There should be no connection to the beings living in this world. All universes are connected. Oh, I haven't heard from you in a while, Sage. You didn't need my assistance. I will only speak when necessary for the host. I see. While Draco had his mental dialogue with Sage, Suzaku had already started talking. To begin with, there's something I need to talk about. The previous issue related to the Utsusimi Agency. Everything that happened is the mistake of the 5 families. For involving you all in that, I wish to formally apologize. Suzaku bowed her head, surprising everyone present. The most surprised of all was no doubt Draco. Siryu, who sat behind her, also bowed his head. In some respects, however, his expression was sharp. For someone who had attacked them before, his attitude was, I would never have expected anyone from the 5 clans to admit their own mistakes. Apparently, Shuri is not the only servant there who still has manners and respect for others. I suppose we can accept the apologies for now, and we are only accepting those for the incident involving the Utsusimi Agency. Your Himejima clan? You still owe us? Draco, as Akatsuki's leader, was in charge of talking to Suzaku. In fact, the 2 of them were the only ones needed in this place. It was obvious that Siryu was nothing more than some sort of subordinate of Suzaku. I understand that. I assure you that sooner or later you will have the answers you want. The problem is, you can't do it while old Sue is the head of the family. That's right. Suzaku nodded. It's okay. We can work on that later. For now, Siryu, let me warn you just once. Any more disrespect, and I'll be shooting arrows until you can't make any more of those shields. Draco summoned Gondiva again and created an arrow. Unlike the previous arrows, this one had darkness and holy attributes imbued into it. Draco did not ignore Artemis' sudden reaction, though she quickly hid it. It seemed she had discovered something. Suzaku says as she looks at Draco. Like the Grigori, our side individually pursues the rest of the Utsusimi Agency, as well as that group of wizards who are cooperating with them. We have confirmed that, while they are evading our search, there is something they are after. The remaining Shirakuma, right? Draco replies. Yes, we heard that 2 former students from Ryuka High School had taken refuge in the mountains near a prefectural border, where the remains and the people of Oz are in the process of locating them. According to information from our spies who have been deployed at the site, it has been verified that there have already been skirmishes between them. This wasn't how Draco knew. According to Azazel, the rest of the Shirakuma had already been captured before even Tobio awakened his sacred gear. How is it that they were fighting the Wizards of Oz and the Utsusimi Agency? Contact with those spies ceased a few days ago. Most likely, Suzaku, her eyes serious, looked at Draco. I have heard that within Grigori, there was an evil force, a group of people in possession of rare and ferocious sacred gears. Those who fell into the abyss, Nephilim Abyss. For those who just joined the team, Tobio and the rest, this information was disconcerting. They were unaware of the existence of this group. Draco, did you know about this? Natsum asked. That's right. When Satnal betrayed Grigori, he brought with him this group of people. The vast majority of them are people with dangerous skills and unstable minds, so they are dangerous. They were under surveillance by Grigori, but Draco didn't have to finish the sentence. Everyone more or less knew what had happened. I've heard that the elimination of sacred gear holders without the ability to control their power was normal for the Grigori. Why didn't they do the same this time? We could have been spared all this trouble. People change. Even the most ancient beings can change over time. Draco responded. Even for the fallen angels, who had been living for an unimaginable time. No, precisely because they had been living from eternity. It seemed that each of the leaders had embraced their own motives. Therefore, even a traitor came into existence in that organization. That's a pretty convenient statement. Saryu put on a cynical smile. Saryu. Suzaku issued a reprimand before Draco killed the boy. Good. Saryu shrugged. He did not seem particularly afraid of Draco. As the next head of the family, he should have his own aces up his sleeve, his trump cards. Returning to the topic of conversation, Suzaku continued. As for those contacted by the remains of the agency and the wizards, they are a boy and a girl who possess the remaining Shur Akuma, Taoye, and Hunden. I imagine you also know the people involved. In response to Suzaku's statement, Draco, Shigeru Nanaduru, and Koga Hyusuk, correct? Those two were the remaining Shur Akuma. Draco had already been informed of all this by Azazel. The only information relevant to Draco was where they were, nothing else. Koga, that's certainly going to be problematic. The one who says after he exhaled like he was sighing was Cookie. Draco did not know either of these two, but it seemed they were quite famous in school. He had seen their images, and he had to say that while Koga was a normal guy, Shigen was a total beauty. She was more cute than beautiful, but she was still a beauty. Koga-kun, because he had brains despite being a delinquent, he was popular with the girls, so he was similar to Cookie in that respect. Maybe that's why the delinquent in the group found him troublesome. Well, the Koga boy had two choices. Either join Akatsuki or become EXP for Draco. Well, I'd like to take this moment to convey my true intentions to arrange all this, apart from seeing Akino once more. Suzaku switched to the main theme, as if she were flipping a switch. After a heartbeat, she said the following. Why don't we form a temporary united front? Tobio and the others were surprised by this sudden proposal. Still, Draco, Valina, and Lavinia did not give any particular reaction. Suzaku continued. We will present our best efforts, the objective being to capture the remains of the agency. At present, concerning the Shur Akuma and the Wizards of Oz who participated with them, if they become hostile to us, we will take the position of dealing with them. In other words, as far as the Shur Akuma are concerned, you're leaving them in our care? Draco asked. When Suzaku nodded, Draco began to hesitate. The offer was tempting, but also suspicious. Draco did not believe that the 5 clans would agree to work alongside Akatsuki, as they seemed to be a subsidiary of Grigori at the moment. And what is worse, if the 5 clans get involved, Draco will get less experience. I refuse. Draco didn't hesitate. He needed strength, and for that he had to kill. A sad glow passed through Suzaku's eyes. She seemed excited about this alliance, but the direct rejection of Draco had been a small blow to her. Are you certain of this? A small alliance at this time can serve as a bridge to greater change. Draco frowned. What Suzaku said was true. If they really wanted to change the inner workings of the 5 major clans, this might be a good first step. Draco looked at Saryu, who gave him a cynical smile. Ignoring his asshole face, the boy was the next chief of one of the clans. If he was here, that meant he was in favor of the reform Suzaku wanted to achieve. Well, I'm willing to form a small alliance. But you have to leave most of it to us. You'll take care of not letting anyone escape from the place. Suzaku thought for a moment and finally nodded. Very good. To start with, we need information about Nephilim Abyss, as there is a possibility that our group will meet them. In return, we will give you all the information we have regarding this case. Regarding Nephilim Abyss, we'll deliver everything you need without any problems. Before Draco's words, Suzaku let out a sigh of relief. It's a great comfort to me that the negotiations went well, Draco. From behind Suzaku, Saryu said quietly, however, I oppose this. Oh, so he seemed willing to reform the clans, but not to cooperate with Akatsuki or Grigori. Well, in political terms, you could say Suzaku was a progressive liberal, while Saryu was a conservative liberal. What do you think of this? Draco asked. As a team leader, it would be ugly not to ask the rest of your teammates. Even though the decision was Draco's later, It was okay to make them feel like they mattered. Natsum was the first to give her opinion. I think it's okay. Honestly, there's a lot of things I'd like to say to those guys. However, our goal is to rescue all of our classmates, so I think we have to prioritize that. Cookie snorted, then said as he looked up at Siryu. Although I would like to give that smug guy over there a good whack. Well, if we have settled down on this united front, I will accept it. Anyway, nothing would come of me throwing a tantrum over him. In any case, if someone attacks us, it would be nice if he just knocked them down. That really suited his thinking. Valina didn't express anything very different. It's like Samejima Cookie said. Whoever it is, if they oppose us, it's okay to beat them. It's really quite simple. Lavinia put her trust in Draco's judgment and the others by saying, I'll leave it up to you to decide. Tobio and Sae exchanged a look and both nodded. Everyone agreed, which made it easier for Draco. Now, all that remained was to know the location of the remaining Shirakuma. Well, everyone agrees. Suzaku, could you give us the location information now? We want to act as quickly as possible. Suzaku nodded with a smile and withdrew a notebook from her jacket pocket. This is the location where the presence of the remaining Shirakuma was confirmed. Their coordinates. I agree with you. It would be best to leave immediately. Either because they escape or because they're captured. The more time passes, the more likely they are to get out of there. We're planning on going there before the end of the day. Siryu followed Suzaku's words with a touch of cynicism. Well, we can protect them if we get there in time. But I hope you won't hate us if we're not on time. This kid's personality, it was a little twisted. However, it was obvious that he had immense power in his body. Lavinia Rini-san. Suzaku called Lavinia. Yes, Augusta of the Purple Flame. You're familiar with that name, right? When that name came out of Suzaku's mouth, the atmosphere in the room dropped by several degrees. Without a doubt, this was the aura Lavinia was emitting. Yes, she's one of the wizards I'm chasing. She is the Wicked Witch of the East, Augusta. And WWE Augusta DxD. She had spoken more calmly about Augusta when she was with Draco, perhaps because this attachment to him had given her confidence. But it was clear that the mere mention of the witch was enough to disturb Lavinia's emotions. Suzaku continued. As far as Oz is concerned, I just remembered that I had been informed that you were the disciple of Glenda, who is the Wizard of the South. The West comes here too. Although both East and West are problematic, I wonder, could the North come too? Perhaps, although I think they haven't left their country yet. Well, then, the position of the king of the Emerald City of Oz concerning the current situation is? Lavinia lowered her eyes in response to Suzaku's question. I don't know. I have received absolutely nothing about the situation over there. In response to Lavinia, whose voice sounded forced, Suzaku responded, Thank you. That's enough. Lifting her index finger, Suzaku gave Draco a piece of advice. Just a tip for Akatsuki. You should not associate too closely with the Grigori. Even at best, they are objects of observation. You are, of course, because of the powers you have gained. However, I have heard that the Vatican has ordered the murder of everyone connected with the Grigori in this country. If you come across an exorcist who is enthusiastic about his work, in that case, I'll just have to hunt them down. Draco cut off Suzaku. He understood that she was giving them some good faith advice, but it was not her place to mess with whoever Akatsuki related to. If the exorcists were truly trying to attack them, Draco only had to kill them and take the experience. Suzaku was surprised by Draco's response, but she only smiled. I am sure that is the case. I don't think a few exorcists can really handle you. But, just as I warn you of exorcists, I warn you of the current heads of the 5 clans. I think you know firsthand how they think. Suzaku stroked Akino's head. If all the chiefs thought like Sue, then they were going to get in the way of Draco and company sooner or later. Are you finished talking? The celestial voice of Artemis interrupted the conversation between Draco and Suzaku. Yes, Suzaku said as she stood up. She approached Draco and took his hand. Thank you for trusting me. Let's talk openly when things calm down. We'll have a proper banquet, so we can thank you properly. Of course, I'm sure you won't let me down. Suzaku nodded as she smiled and left the room, followed by Siryu. Draco gestured to her group, directing them to leave. They all did not hesitate for a second and left the room, leaving the dragon and the goddess alone. Draco sat across from Artemis. Although Draco looked like a Western boy and Artemis was a Greek goddess, both were following Japanese customs and sitting on the tatami. Artemis was an extremely beautiful woman. Although, considering that she was one of the major goddesses of Olympus, it would be reasonable for her to be so beautiful. Normally, Draco would look at Artemis with lust. However, knowing her history, particularly her hatred for men, Draco had refrained from looking at the goddess with lustful eyes, and had even refrained from doing so with Suzuku in case it would make a bad impression on the goddess. Your main weapon is a bow. Artemis broke the silence. That's right. Draco didn't deny it. It was useless to deny it anyway. You're a dragon. Why do you use a bow as your main weapon? Draco could not find any ill intention in Artemis' words. She was just asking out of curiosity, nothing more. Well, I've always thought archery was fascinating, and when I was given the opportunity to use a bow, I didn't miss it. Over time, I've grown more and more fond of my bow. I see. Artemis only nodded, though Draco could sense that she was no longer so cold to him. As the goddess of the hunt, Draco must have pleased Artemis simply by being so emotionally connected to his bow. Artemis extended her hand to Draco. Your bow, may I see it? Although it was a question, Draco felt it was practically in order. He couldn't refuse Artemis' request. Well, maybe so, but he didn't want to risk the goddess getting angry with him. With that in mind, Gondivo appeared in Draco's hands. Without hesitation, he handed it over to Artemis. If she didn't want to return the bow to Draco, he just had to put it back in the system. Artemis began to mumble as she examined the bow. It's similar to Gondiva, but different at the same time. How strange. This bow is extraordinary. It doesn't have a true physical body. It seems to be created by multiple magical circuits on a divine level. This is fascinating. Used to its fullest extent, it may even be more powerful than the bow those Hindu gods have. Artemis finished inspecting the bow and looked at Draco. She asked, "Would you be willing to part with this bow?" No. There was no way Draco would let Gondiva go. This was his trump card. It would be stupid to give it to someone else. It's a waste that this bow is in your hands. No matter how much of a dragon you are, you can't bring this weapon to its full potential. Others would put it to better use. Artemis was right, and at the same time not. It was true that Draco was still a child, compared to other dragons that had lived for millennia, and that he could not exert his weapon to its full potential at this time. That was only temporary, however, and sooner or later he would have the power to use it to its fullest. I'm the only one who can use that bow. Artemis raised an eyebrow. The phrase Draco had uttered was arrogant, but it was heartfelt. But she did not believe the dragon was the only one capable of using this bow. She aimed the bow and created an arrow with a divine aura, only for a blazing fire to shatter the arrow. Artemis frowned and attempted to create another arrow. When the fire appeared, she tried to fight it with her own divine aura. I have told you, this bow is of the highest standard, as you've already noticed, but it also has great pride. Actually, I'm surprised. The last time someone took that bow, it ended up burning to death. And that person wasn't a nobody, but a high-class devil. So it is. Artemis wasted no time in returning Draco's bow. It was a pity she could not obtain this weapon for her faction, but since Draco had refused, she already planned to return the bow to him. The bow was not Artemis' goal for her visit. Far from it. Draco still thought what the reason was for an Olympic goddess to appear in Japan, but the only option that was truly solid was that they must have felt something for using a noble phantasm. You must be here for something, Lady Artemis? I doubt that someone like you can set foot in other gods' lands without having a valid reason. Amaterasu is Unami, who was the ruling Japanese goddess in this world. Well, that wasn't important at the time. In this year, the factions were still enemies of each other. There was no way the Japanese gods would let other gods from other factions wander around their country. I'll get straight to the point. A few months ago, Apollon and I felt a connection with someone who was in Japan. We don't have many details since the connection was short, but we more or less knew the place where the connection took place. Zeus sent me to investigate, and thanks to the local powers, I discovered that there was only one event related to the supernatural at that time. Of everyone present at that incident, Only you use a bow, so I am 95% sure you are the person my brother and I connected with. No, I'm 99% sure because I can feel the connection very weakly right now. Draco tensed up internally. How was he going to explain this situation? It was clear that the connection was caused by Phoebus' catastrophe. That was the only possibility. But why had that connection originated in the first place? The concept of the noble phantasm, Phoebus' catastrophe, is directly linked to the gods Apollon and Artemis. That's why they felt the connection. Sage explained the reason briefly. If that was the reason, wouldn't it draw the attention of the god Agni if Draco used the noble phantasm, Agni Gandiva? Attracting the attention of the Hindu gods did not benefit Draco at this time. They were, after all, the most powerful mythology, only being weaker than Great Red, Ophis, and Trihexa. But what worried Draco at this point was the goddess in front of him. What is your relationship to Atalanta? No wonder Draco was surprised. Could Artemis have known that Phoebus' catastrophe came from Atalanta? That's impossible. There must be another reason. That connection I felt the other day, I've felt something similar before. Apollon may not have realized it, but there was no way I could have ignored that feeling. You are somehow related to the heroine Atalanta. That made more sense. Using Phoebus' catastrophe, a noble phantasm that belonged to Atalanta in the first place, must have caused a connection similar to the one Artemis felt when Atalanta prayed to her or something. In the myths, Atalanta was said to have sworn an oath of maidenhood to the goddess Artemis, suggesting that she might have been one of the hunters. However, this was something that Draco was not quite sure if it was true or not. I'm sorry, but I have no relationship with her, to my knowledge. I'm a pure-blood dragon. That's all I know. Is that so? Artemis let out a disappointed sigh. It seemed that she had been waiting for something important for her, and all her hopes had been dashed. Now that Draco thought better of it, he knew of the existence of heroes' descendants in the world of DxD. Perhaps Artemis was expecting to meet the descendant of Atalanta. Artemis' face took on a neutral tone again in less than a second. She was a goddess, so a disappointment, as this was how a simple stone in her path. I would like to know a little more about you, dragon. You're not a first-generation dragon. Dragons created from huge masses of energy. Who are your parents? First-generation dragons are the most powerful dragons in this universe. Draig, Albion, Ophis, Great Red, and Tiamat are some of these dragons. I don't know. I was alone when I woke up. My only mother figure could be considered Tiamat. But she didn't raise me, she just took me in. Artemis reacted involuntarily when she heard the name Tiamat. She was the strongest of all the great dragon kings, so it was normal for a goddess like Artemis to react to the name. Tiamat used to live in seclusion, but from time to time, she caused chaos on Earth. Once in a while, it was once every 100 years or so. Now, I have formed Akatsuki. Akatsuki is an organization of mercenaries. So we do any work that is not commissioned as long as it is not against our moral principles, and we are paid fairly. There was no way that Draco would not use this opportunity to make the Akatsuki name more known internationally. Akatsuki? I've never heard of it, but I'll keep it in mind. Draco thought it normal that she had never heard the name Akatsuki, as it had barely been created. Other than Grigori and Grauzober, no one else should know that name. Suzuka knew it, but she must have been informed by Grigori that she had contacted them to arrange this meeting. I have an offer for you, dragon. Go ahead. Draco was curious. What did Artemis want from him? Receive my blessing and join my team of hunters. Draco was stunned. Join Artemis' hunting team? I'm sorry, but I have to decline your offer. Draco was clear about that. Receiving Artemis' blessing was tempting, but there were a number of requirements to be met in order to join Artemis' hunting team. Artemis hunters are maidens who have sworn allegiance to the maiden goddess Artemis/Diana to join her on the hunt and refuse love for as long as they live. First point, Draco is not a maiden. In the legends, Artemis has shown the ability to transform a male to female, but Draco doesn't have plans for that. Second point, Draco was not going to swear loyalty to a goddess he knew for no more than 10 minutes. Third point, Draco was not going to give up everything to go hunting. Fourth point, Draco wasn't going to turn down love. In short, Draco was not going to fulfill any of the requirements necessary to receive the blessing of the goddess Artemis. Artemis frowned when she heard such a quick response from Draco. He had not even hesitated to refuse it. Is it because of the requirements? In that case, you do not have to worry about that. The requirements are only for women, not men. You could say you're a hunter, but only in name. You'll get all the benefits of becoming a hunter, and you'll only have to help us hunt once in a while. Now, that was very tempting. Receiving the blessing of the goddess of the hunt and being able to hunt mythological monsters, as well as making her name more famous, were all good things for Draco. In fact, was there something wrong with all this? He didn't have to swear loyalty to Artemis or give up everything to go hunting. All the previous requirements were completely void for him. I accept. A small smile formed on Artemis' face. Very well. You are now a member, one of my hunters, but I cannot yet give you my blessing. I've seen your archer skills before, but it's not enough to get my blessing. You need to pass a test first. What do I have to do? Nothing special. Your present mission, complete it satisfactorily and without casualties, using only your bow, and you will have my blessing. Since I don't want to involve Olympus with the problems of the fallen angels and those of Oz, I can't keep an eye on you personally. That's why one of my hunters will be supervising you closely, although I'll be waiting not far from you in case any problems occur. Any questions? No. Well, I have nothing more to discuss with you. You're free to go. Draco nodded and left the room, not without saying goodbye to the goddess. Now he had to get Artemis' blessing. To do so, he had to finish his mission using only his bow. Draco had no problem with that, for what he could not solve with his bow, alone Mordred could. Why had Draco accepted Artemis' proposal so easily? Even with the potential benefits Artemis had given him, Draco should have given it some more thought. In fact, he would have done so under normal circumstances. However, he had received a message from the system. Artemis' blessing will bring many benefits to the host. I recommend accepting proposal. This was the first time that Sage said anything on his own, so this blessing should be something interesting. To tell you the truth, Draco was going to leave the DxD world in a year, at the most to leave when he was born, so Artemis couldn't summon him if he wasn't there. When Draco left the building, Suzaku and Sairyu had already left while the rest were waiting for him. Come on, we have work to do. After Draco left, Artemis was still sitting on the tatami. You may pass, Artemis said. She seemed to be talking to the air, but that wasn't the case. A few seconds later, a woman entered the room. She was a tall, graceful, beautiful woman. She had dark brown eyes, a slightly upturned nose, copper-colored skin, and the silver circle braided into the top of her long, dark hair gave her the impression of a Persian princess. Her look seemed cold, though that was her natural expression. Go ahead, you're free to speak your mind, Artemis said calmly. Why did you accept a man? The woman asked. Artemis did not answer the woman's question and remained silent about the answer. Was it because he was related to Tiamat? No, it wasn't because of that. Was it because of his great skill with the bow? Probably, but that was not the real reason either. Zoe, you have been with me for thousands of years as my faithful lieutenant. You've always been with me. You know everything I've lived through. From the first generation of hunters, the capture of the golden deer, the giant war, Orion, all those events we lived through together. The life of an immortal is not always happy. You of all people should know that. And I have many regrets. Are you saying that? Yes. Even though that boy says he has no connection to Atalanta, my guilty conscience forces me to want to help him. Atalanta. She was one of my most faithful followers, and I couldn't stop my father from turning her into a lion. Artemis sighed. So many thousands of years had passed since Atalanta's passing, and she still had not forgotten the tragic death of the huntress. Perhaps if life gave her another chance to find Atalanta. Only if perhaps. No, there was no point in thinking about those things. Atalanta should be at the Elysium right now, or she could have chosen reincarnation. In either case, Artemis could not see the one who used to be her most devoted follower. Sigh. Zoe, I know he's a boy, but he's not the only boy who's joined us in the hunts. Both Hippolytus and Orion hunted alongside us in the past. I don't have a problem with a guy joining us, but I know. That's why I'm giving this assignment to you. You have to get him accepted by the other hunters. There aren't as many of us as there used to be, and one more addition can be a great help on our hunts." Zoe nodded. If her goddess commanded it, she would go to fight the great Red himself with pleasure. It was because she knew her goddess would never give her an impossible mission that she would gladly work for her. The first generation of Artemis Slayers numbered a total of 80, but they had been declining over time. Some fell in love, and others were defeated in combat, losing their immortality. "Should I get going, my goddess? What are you going to get started for?" "To supervise the boy, my goddess." Artemis covered her mouth as she let out a chuckle. No, you're not going to be the one in charge of that. I have someone else in mind." Did I just introduce a crossover? Yes. Why? Because I wanted to. On the other hand, Artemis is willing to take Draco on her female group of hunters. Why? Draco used this quote to explain the reason of Saturnal's betrayal. People change. Even the most ancient beings can change over time. Draco and the rest returned to their base/home after meeting with Suzaku, Sairyu, and Artemis. They were not going to take a bus back considering the urgent situation they were in. Luckily, Suzaku had left the limousine behind with their driver, so they could travel more comfortably. The limousine parked in front of the doors of Draco's house, and 2 people got out of it. "Draco, I want to go too." "No, you stay here." Onisa. Aquino wanted to accompany Draco and the others to the location of the remaining Shirakuma. Still, he was adamant that she wasn't going to accompany them. They were going to work, not have fun in a playground. "You're not the only one who's not coming. Stay and watch movies with Kuroko and Chiron. We'll be back in a few hours." Draco ignored Aquino's protests as he dragged her into the house. Aquino could only look at Draco with an angry, pouting look. The door to the house opened before they arrived. What emerged from there was a person in heavy armor with a large sword in her right hand. "Shall we go now?" Mordred asked. She had received a message from Draco, warning that they were to prepare for a mission. She did not have to prepare at all, as she could summon her battle armor at any time. "What are you doing dressed like that?" Draco raised an eyebrow at the sight of Mordred in her battle dress. Where are the clothes I asked you for? Why aren't you wearing them?" Draco asked. I'm wearing." Mordred removed her armor, revealing the clothes she wore under the great armor of the Middle Ages that characterized her. A black suit with red clouds, with a large neck that covered half of Mordred's face. This was undoubtedly the official uniform of Akatsuki in Naruto, and it was also in the Akatsuki founded by Draco. Even when the suit covered part of her face, Draco could see that Mordred was uncomfortable with the suit. "What is it?" Draco asked worriedly. In the end, the suit was nothing more than a sign of identity, and nothing was going to happen if Mordred did not wear this suit either. "I feel strange. I'm so used to wearing the armor for fighting that I feel strange thinking I'm not going to fight in it." So that's what it was. Although Draco also found Mordred's attitude a bit odd. He expected a slightly more aggressive response, not something so normal. "Don't overthink it and get in the limo. Give me the rest of the clothes. We don't have time to waste." Mordred nodded and threw a bag at Draco. He opened it and saw that inside were several identical suits, but of different sizes for all those waiting in the car. Just in case, there were emergency rations as well, as they were probably not going to arrive for dinner. Mordred walked to the car, but did not enter the back. Instead, she headed for the driver's door. "Hey, what are you doing? Get out of here." The driver Suzaku had left in charge was the one who had asked when Mordred opened the door. Before he could react, he saw his world spinning. Yes, Mordred had sent him flying all over the street. Without thinking much about it, she got into the car. There was no doubt that she wanted to be the driver of the car. Draco could only sigh when he saw this. Mordred's temperament was the most difficult to control and at the same time the easiest to predict. She was a rebellious girl, looking for attention and fun, or at least she was now that she didn't have to worry about Holy Grail or some other nonsense. Draco didn't even question Mordred's decision to drive. She has the class skill, riding B, so she can drive any modern vehicle without any problem, including planes, helicopters, etc. Draco got into the back of the limo, where the rest of the group was. Lavinia, Tobio, Cookie, Natsum, and Valina were waiting for Draco. Well, here's your new uniform for the missions. Draco took out the 7 suits and handed them over one by one. So as not to confuse the suits, each one had a name on the label. How do we wear this? SAE asked. Draco did not understand the question at first, but he notices the issue when he saw the flushed face of both SAE and Natsum. If you wanted to see my body, all you had to do was say so. But in front of everyone, Natsum muttered under her breath. It seemed they had misunderstood something. Just put it on top of what you already have. The suit is made of a special fabric, so you'll hardly notice you're wearing it. Draco put on his own suit while he explained it to the rest of the group. Watching Draco put on the suit, the rest did the same. Draco waited until everyone had their suits before he started explaining a couple of details. Well, I have a couple of things to say to you guys. Tobio, Natsum, and Cookie, your role this time is going to be the support. Lavinia and Valina, you have the freedom to act more freely, always within the objectives of the group. Our objective this time is to recover the 2 remaining Shirakuma. More specifically, they can come back alive or dead, I don't care which is the final result. Lavinia, you have permission to act as you see fit should that purple flame which appear. Draco briefly explained everyone's role in this mission. Cookie, Natsum, and Tobio had not yet trained enough to take the main role in a mission, so they were going to take a secondary role. This was a good opportunity for them to get some real experience. Essie, you'll stay close to Tobio. For your part, Tobio, I want Essie's safety to be a top priority. Although I don't think I need to tell you that. Draco said with a smile. Don't worry, I'll protect her, Tobio said with determination. Tobio! Essie blushed as she heard how determined her childhood friend was. They had had a little argument earlier, as Tobio did not want Essie to join the mission. However, Valina had already informed them that that option was not permitted. Draco was not going to risk not having a countermeasure plan if Tobio lost control. SAE was the perfect person to keep Tobio in check. SAE, don't do anything rash. That was Tobio's recognition. SAE nodded, of course, with a smile. Natsum had repeatedly been nodding as she watched this situation with a smile. Hey, Tuja-san, we'll all protect Tuja-san. Well, being protected by you seems like it wouldn't be worth it. Such was Cookie's response to this. Hello? I'm not a weak girl, you know? Draco ignored the argument they were having and headed for Valina and Lavinia. Well, I hope you can keep an eye on these guys. Lavinia responded with a brief, I will, while Valina said confidently, I'm not an amateur. In this way, Akatsuki made his way to the location of the remaining Shirakuma. The limousine moved forward with Mordred behind the wheel while following the instructions on the car's navigation system, where the location had been entered. Draco was in the front seat next to Mordred. The rest of them were preparing themselves mentally in the back of the limousine. While filling up at a gas station near their route, they took the time to prepare a reserve amount using portable gas cans. It was insurance since anything could happen where they were going. The sun was also gradually starting to set. It seemed that, by the time they reached their destination, the sun would have set completely. Draco turned, looking at everyone in the back. Have you looked at the information? The information in question was a file that Grigori had prepared for them. Draco had had them all review its contents. I have no doubt that we will be up against the remnants of the Utsusimi Agency, the wizards and the users of sacred gear. In fact, the data was information about these sacred gear users. There were even photos attached to the individuals. It was the data from the Abyss team. I gave a review of the material. However, as far as your sacred gears are concerned, don't they manipulate living creatures like us? Cookie said, you should know by now that there are a variety of sacred gear skills. Issei, Hyudu, and Valina also have a different sacred gear than you, don't they? The abilities of Tobio and the others, who were embodiments of supernatural power, were abilities that were primarily grouped under the classification of independent avatar type. This covered Tobio, Natsum, Cookie, and Lavinia. For Valina and Issei, their sacred gear belonged to a system that worked by unleashing the power of a dragon that was sealed inside. In addition to these, there was a wide range of sacred gear abilities, with the varieties including altered status, seal of limit, attribute, defense, counter, and create, among others. Naturally, among these some awakened a single skill. However, there were also more sacred gears that possessed 2 or even 3 higher abilities simultaneously. Known as Longinus, only 13 of them existed in this world. Tobio, Lavinia, Valina, Issei, and Valerie were all in possession of a Longinus. Draco continued. Within the material you reviewed earlier, there is only one thing I want you to bear in mind. The powers that the Boys of the Abyss team have are extremely problematic and powerful. If it's a competition between you and them, you will get an overwhelming victory. However, depending on different factors, they can easily end your life. After all, that team was specifically organized from skill holders who were difficult to manage. The Abyss team's skills had numerous effects and were problematic because it was impossible to recover from them. Azazel had told Draco that even he, the leader of Grigori, could not recover from the effects of those sacred gears. The abilities listed there, I want you to at least be aware of them. That information will directly affect your chance of survival. Tobio and the other students answered, yes. After that, they continued in silence for a short time. It was obvious that the students were getting nervous and tense, until Lavinia broke the silence. Before we reach our destination, I'd like to tell you a short story. When everyone was listening intently, she began to speak. I was born in a coastal town in Italy. Lavinia Rennie, despite possessing a talent for magic, was not born in the house of a genuine magician. She was born into an ordinary family. However, when she was born, she had owned a supernatural ability. Since her childhood, an ice doll had manifested itself at her side, the Longinus Absolute Demise / Eternal Ice Princess. As a child, she knew nothing of this and feared the Ice Princess more than anyone else she could see. When she was 9 years old, a great incident happened to her. Her parents died in an accident. For a 9-year-old girl who had been through the death of her parents, she suffered even as she understood the situation. Since she, who always talked about the ice goblin, was considered a stranger by her relatives, it was difficult to find someone willing to take Lavinia in. For me, from that moment on, compared to how I've been since due to the loss of Mom and Dad, I was deeply depressed, and I hated the ice goblin deeply. In fact, it was because she had been under the impression that what had killed her parents was the ice goblin. She felt resentment, hatred, as well as malice toward the ice goblin who never left her side. If they were watching her, they could see nothing. They could only perceive Lavinia as a troubled child who would rage aloud into the empty air. Even for Lavinia herself, memories of that time were rather vague. Because of the excessive sadness, the excessive fear, the large negative emotions she had as a child, she sealed her memories of that time in her own heart, or perhaps in the sacred gear that was lodged in her body. However, she clearly remembered this. After taking a walk in the garden of her house, Lavinia experienced a sudden and strange sensation. Before she knew it, she was standing in a place with an unfamiliar landscape. The place was surrounded by tall trees. Before she knew it, she found herself standing in a forest somewhere. Surprised, Lavinia began to look around, and what she saw was a wooden building like the one in a fairy tale. It was an old, isolated house with a slight roundness, like one where a mage could live. Standing in front of the isolated house was an old woman with an ordinary smile. She had a pointy hat and robe, held a cane, and looked like a mage from a storybook. The old woman said, "It's okay now?" The old woman, the Witch of the South Glenda, who was Lavinia's teacher, took her in and taught her how to handle her sacred gear, and also how to handle magic. Upon meeting this kindly teacher, Lavinia's heart, which had been sealed, began to gradually thaw. Glenda, due to certain circumstances, had moved from the world of Oz to live in this world. Her purpose was to study sacred gears. Life in Glenda's forest was simple, and for Lavinia, it was a time of irreplaceable happiness. It was there that Lavinia cultivated her talent for magic. It happened when Lavinia was 13. Glenda suggested that Lavinia spend time outside with wizards of her own generation. That is, it was Glenda's judgment that if there were other wizards present in this world, then she should cultivate a relationship with the other wizards in this world. Soon after, Glenda entrusted Lavinia to Grauzoberer. It hurt Lavinia to separate from Glenda, but in addition to longing for her teacher, she decided to launch herself into her studies at the Magical Association. It was after she had spent several years with Grauzoberer. More bad news came to Lavinia. Glenda had been attacked by a mage who had come from Oz. After receiving that report, I returned to the forest, which was my second hometown. However, the isolated house in the woods where she had spent so much time had been burned down, leaving only the charred ruin of one house. Glenda's well-being was unknown. However, if it was only the wizards who had come from Oz, she knew how to investigate their trail. Lavinia pursued the wizards, and in the midst of that, she became involved in the Utsasimi Agency and the Shirakuma project the other day. Natsum then asked, "So you're struggling to find out about your teacher's condition?" Lavinia responded, "I was not given a straight answer. Therefore, whether they enter Oz directly or remain in this world to continue meddling, whatever the case, I have decided to pursue them. To that end, since this is my situation, I would like each of you to accomplish your own goal. I don't want to be an obstacle. Even if it's just me, I will pursue them." As I said that, Lavinia's expression, unlike what it used to be, showed a stubborn character. The first to speak was Draco. "What kind of organization would we be if we can't even help our own members? What kind of boyfriend would I be if I can't support my girlfriend when she needs it? Don't worry, Lavinia. Even if we have to go across land and sea, even if we have to cross dimensions, we'll be there to support you. Won't we, guys?" "Of course." Natsum responded with determination. Tobio and Sae exchanged glances. "Lavinia-san, you have helped us so much. The least we can do is return the favor," Cookie said as he crossed his arms. "It's pretty irritating, but it's like EQ says. If it was just us, it wouldn't have been so nice. Well, the ship has sailed. In any case, aren't we heading for those witches anyway? Well, then I say we should eliminate them all at once." Natsum, leaning forward, suddenly embraced Lavinia. "All right, even Samajima-kun says good things now and then. That's right, Lavinia. Let's cooperate with each other. Since we're partners, it's too late to back out now." At the voices of her comrades, Lavinia smiled. Lavinia put her hands on the arms of Natsum, who was still holding her. "Natsum, Sharkshay, Toby, thank you." She then broke away from Natsum and headed for Draco, who was in the front seat. Lavinia hugged him from behind and pressed her cheek to the boys. "Dear, I love you." "Me too, me too." By explaining their circumstances and making all the members aware of it, they were unified in their thoughts. As they drove to the battlefield in this vehicle, they had strengthened their unity. Before this, even Mordred smiled from the driver's seat. Suddenly, Cookie asked Valina a question, as she was the only one who had not said anything so far. "What about you, Lysidra-sensei? Will you cooperate with the magic girl?" Valina had not intervened at all during Lavinia's history. Everyone's eyes were focused on the girl. Valina put on an abruptly nihilistic smile. "I have been aware of Lavinia's circumstances since before. After all, I've always been interested in fighting the Wizards of Oz. Well, I'll lend you my power." Lavinia smiled and said, "Yes, I know. Vachan is such a simple girl after all." Lavinia's smile, who was still hugging Draco, reached Valina from the rearview mirror. When she noticed it, Valina's face turned red as a tomato. She had wanted to show a cool look, but her real intentions were really frank. The location of the group changed as they went along. The car had entered a valley, and the further they went, the fewer houses there were. It seemed that even the road was getting a little narrower. The sun had already set, and the darkness had fallen. According to the time shown on the clock inside the car, it was 9 p.m. The darkened road was illuminated by the high beams of the limousine. Still, the world within a short distance was covered in darkness. The number of nearby trees increased, becoming a forest for the first time until they finally traveled along a forest road. Even with the cars, it was different, as the vehicles that used to circulate were no longer there. "Yua, this is certainly not a popular place." As they looked out the window, Natsum expressed some of her thoughts. This limousine could have been similar to the coffin of a reckless person sinking into hell. The view outside was enough to give anyone the creeps. Perhaps it was because they were invalidly covered by several unknown trees. Still, the atmosphere was enveloped in peculiar darkness. Are we, by any chance, fighting in a forest for the first time? Tobio muttered as he looked out over the forest. Upon hearing that, the expression of Issei, who stood beside him, darkened instantly. A battle in a forest in the dead of night. It seemed to be an intense fight compared to the average conditions above the shopping center or department store. Tall grasses, not knowing what was underfoot, and trees that gave rise to shadows and cover. For them, these would become dangerous factors. A forest, this brings back memories, Draco muttered. Yes, master, I miss it a little too. Mordred, who was driving the limo, told Draco. Draco and Mordred had spent a long time together with Chiron, Kuroka, and Tiamat living in the forest. That is why this type of terrain was the one they were most familiar with. Under normal circumstances, trees could be used by their opponents as cover. But that didn't work with Draco. After all, he had the ability, the one who is loved by nature. We're close, Mordred warned. The cursor on the navigation system was constantly overlapping with the destination point. It was at this point that Draco noticed a presence in front of them, about 50 meters away. Stop! Mordred braked immediately, and the car came to a forced stop. With everyone in the car hit by the sudden brake, Issei and Natsum let out Kaya reflexes. Cookie leaned forward from the back seat to ask, "What's going on?" "There's a person in front of us," Draco responded calmly. Unbuckling his belt, Draco stepped out of the limousine. The rest followed a little later. "We're already in enemy territory, so be careful," Draco reminded them. Natsum carried a lantern in her hand, lighting the way. Draco, Mordred, and Valina didn't need it, but it wasn't the same for the rest. They advanced a few yards, but there didn't seem to be anyone in the area. The group tensed instantly, as they could be facing an enemy trap. "You can come out. We won't hurt you. Unless you're our enemy, of course." Draco spoke in a particular direction. Natsum pointed in the direction Draco had headed. When the light came on, a lonely girl appeared. She was blonde. Part of her long hair had been braided, with dark features that suggested she was a foreigner. They had barely arrived and had already found their first target. The color of her eyes did not match. The right eye was blue, and the left eye was black. With a beautiful face, she was Shigeon Nanadaru. It is said that she was the most beautiful girl at Ryuka High School. She was a biracial girl who was part Japanese and part Western. She was called Shigeon by her closest friends. Shigeon wore the school uniform of the school to which she had transferred, but she had gotten dirty in various places, and there were even parts that were broken. Some mud had been left on her face. She was breathing hard, which made it clear that she had just run for her life. She addressed Draco in a weak voice. "Please help." Draco nodded with a smile. "Relax, we are your allies." Shigeon visibly relaxed and began to pay attention to the rest. She recognized Natsum and Issei instantly. Managawa-san and Tuja-san? With two of her former companions appearing before her eyes, perhaps feeling relieved as well as surprised, Shigeon ended up sinking to the ground just where she was. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Are you okay?" "Relax, Nanadura-san." Natsum and Issei rushed over to the now-seated Shigeon to give her a gentle hand. At the same time, Tobio and Cookie, who had also exited the vehicle, faced with the safety of one of their remaining companions, relaxed their tension to some extent and let out slight smiles. Cookie noticed something that was held in Shigeon's arms, however, and turned to Tobio. "Is it the sacred gear of Nanaduru?" Shigeon was holding a small four-legged animal in her arms, wearing something like a mask over his face, and two horns were growing from his head. The mask had a strange sort of pattern that Draco recognized. This was the pattern of Tatetsu of the Shirakuma. In other words, that which Shigeon held was the sacred gear Tatetsu. Shigeon, after she had been attended to and had recovered her disposition, told Draco and the others, "We have to get out of here. People who are using strange techniques." Shigeon could say no more as Jean, Tobio's dog, had interrupted her with a grunt. Draco had noticed a threat there as well. The man was quite adept at hiding his presence, it seemed, as Draco barely noticed where he was hiding. It was only when the enemy had let his intent to kill slip that Draco had sensed his presence. Seeing how alert Jean was, they all prepared for combat. Jean, at Tobio's call, the dog drew a distorted sword from the shadows at his feet and prepared to use his mouth. Such an obvious attempt to kill. Interesting, Valina said arrogantly. This presence is not a magic formula, Lavinia added. What appeared in the area illuminated by the headlights was a strange, one-legged, 2-foot stone statue. The creature had small wings growing from its back and a single horn on its head, its appearance undeniably grotesque. Draco shuddered when he saw the statue, shaking violently. "Close your eyes, all of you." When he screamed, everyone did those and covered their eyes with their arms. In an instant, the area was filled entirely with dazzlingly intense light. When the light stopped, Valina and the others timidly opened their eyes. The strange creature was gone. It was written in those files, remember? Cursed statue of radiance lost. Brain shine statue. As for their characteristic, if one directly receives that light which it releases, it gradually steals their sight. Depending on the circumstances, a person's eyes would be completely unable to see anything. Valina reminded them. It was frightening what the young woman said, but her expression was serene. Natsum swallowed her saliva and said, "Isn't that more than terrifying?" Valina answered again. It was written in the file. Abyss team is made up of members with these kinds of skills. That's right. The Abyss team was made up of Sacred Gear's users who inflicted damage that their opponents could not recover from. If they had been hit by the attack like the one just now, they would have been robbed of their sight or possibly lost their hearing. Features that impose severe mental contamination with serious side effects, or others that use insects that parasitize the opponent's body gradually from the inside. Murder, torture. The Abyss team was made up of a collection of possessors who were completely inhumane. It had been explained to Tobio and the others that if one were to fight them in advance, one's mind and body would be severely damaged in some way. The statue at this time was a sacred gear that, when it opened its eyes, would release a light and take away a person's sight. A team that kills at first sight, if that's the truth, I'd rather not have them as opponents. While paying attention to her surroundings, Natsum muttered. Then Valina and Lavinia turned their gaze to a single point. All the others agreed with their glances. From the silent darkness of the road, laughter could be heard. Pu-pu-pu, a pu-pu-pu. As for what appeared as he let out such an unpleasant laugh, it was a thin man. He was dressed in something similar to the Nephilim uniform worn by Tobio and the others. The man was wearing sunglasses, had a crooked mouth, and an ugly smile on his face. At his feet was the aforementioned mystery stone statue. His eyes were closed once more. "I wish your eyes would quickly become blind. I wish to make you understand the feeling of having blind eyes." While the man was talking, he had the eyes of the stone statue at his feet open. Tobio and the others did not allow the silent attack, and Tobio, Natsum, and Cookie moved quickly. "Slash! Do it! Spread out!" Jean charged at high speed with a sword in his mouth. Griffin took to the air, and the tip of Bikes' long tail shot out towards the opponent. It was a simultaneous triple attack, but even in the midst of this, the man's unpleasant smile did not cease. Shigen shouted, "That statue! There are two of them!" Hearing that scream, Valina immediately took a quick look behind them and fired a silver aura from her hand. There was another stone statue, but Tobio and the others were covered. Lavinia spread a magic circle and attacked her opponent. The man was enveloped by the blue aura release from the magic circle, but there was no damage. The simultaneous strikes taken from Jin's sword and Byakus's tail were insufficient to break the stone statue in front of them. Still, the stone statue behind them was destroyed with a single attack from Valina. The man avoided Griffin's direct high-speed attack. "Die!" The boy opened his eyes for the first time when he heard the emotionless voice from behind him. He felt the sharp, cold arrowhead on his neck before he felt it pierce his neck easily. Draco had taken advantage of Tobio and the others, distracting the boy from disappearing into the trees. Communicating with them mentally, his presence had vanished completely. With one of the sacred gears unusable because of Valina, and the other facing Tobio and the rest, Draco had a clear path to attack the boy. With Lavinia's attack, Draco had discovered that the boy had some sort of protection, and was quite adept at dodging attacks as he had demonstrated with Griffin. To secure the one-shot, Draco had positioned himself directly behind him. After 2 months of not moving up a level, Draco was quite happy to receive the familiar notification. By killing this boy, he had received 500 experience points. Although his sacred gear could be considered high level, the boy's skill was not as good, so he had received the equivalent of a Tier 2 experience. Upon seeing the boy's dead body, there were several reactions from the people present. Essie, Tobio, Natsum, and Shigen all paled, but more or less accepted the situation. This guy was the enemy and had to be killed, or they would be the ones to suffer. Valina, Lavinia, and Cookie had no particular reaction. They accepted the kill without any problem. Good job, Master. Mordred was smiling. It was the first time she had ever seen Draco killing, and it was always good to confirm that he had the skills to be her master. Draco had warned Mordred not to make a move if she didn't have to. If possible, Draco would like to kill as many of the enemies as possible on his own. With the battle over, everyone took a deep breath. Shigen then told everyone as if she had just remembered. Tobikun is fighting in the village over there. Shigen's expression was urgent as he pointed at the village. Yes, let's get Koga. Draco nodded and headed for the limo. Wait! Draco turned and gave Mordred a strange look. She summoned her sword, Clarent, and looked vigilantly up into the trees. Come out! Mordred began to get impatient when she saw that this person was not coming out, though not that she had much patience from the start. Crimson lightning was being violently deployed around Clarent, showing that Mordred was ready to attack at any moment. Draco was also on guard, as he could not sense this person. This meant that either it was very good at hiding, or it was more than 200 yards away. But Draco did not need to use his senjutsu to feel the presence of that person. Hey, are there any people around here? Draco asked mentally. Yes, there's a girl up on top of one of us. She's pointing with a silver bow at you. So she was the reason why Mordred was so tense. Well, it's not like Draco was too comfortable knowing a girl was aiming a bow without him knowing. You must be Artemis Hunter, right? If that girl was really one of Artemis' slayers, then it was best that Mordred didn't attack her. He didn't know if the goddess was stronger than Mordred or not, so he didn't want to take any unnecessary risks. Clarent's lightning stopped, a sign that the girl had stopped aiming her bow at them. Like a flash of lightning, it seemed that the girl had jumped from the top of that tree before falling in front of Draco. The girl in front of Draco had short black hair, tidy in a small ponytail, electric blue eyes, and freckles on her nose. She was wearing a silver polar coat and camouflage pants. She didn't look a day over 17 to 18 years old, although she could have been many years older. She was a beautiful Western girl. If Draco were to say where the girl was born, it would be in the U.S. What struck him most were her electric eyes. A real lightning bolt seemed to pass through them, and a silver bracelet on her right wrist, to which Draco felt a strange connection. On her back was a silver bow, but she had no arrows. Perhaps, like Draco, the Slayers of Artemis could make their own arrows. Status inspection. Talia Grace. Race, demigod/huntress. HP, 2304/2394. MP, 1894. Strength, 1549. Defense, 943. Magic, 1753. Agility, 2543. Abilities, Atmokinesis, Electrokinesis, Animal Communication, Huntress Immortality, Archery. So this is a mugwort hunter. Huh, she's powerful. Draco didn't know what to say, since she was faster than Mordred and outperformed Kuroka in everything except magic. I am Talia Grace, daughter of Zeus and the youngest huntress of Artemis. Pleased to meet you. You must be Draco, right? I'm going to be in charge of your supervision. She introduced herself, and her presentation was not at all discreet. Virtually everyone, including Valina and Draco, was surprised to hear Talia's presentation. This is normal, considering that it is not every day that one meets the daughter of Zeus himself. In a sense, you could say that Artemis and Talia were blood sisters. After that, they all got back into the car. However, this time the seats had changed. Actually, Valina had offered herself for the co-pilot's seat, and Draco accepted. He was now sitting between Natsum and Lavinia, and in front of him was his new guest. "Are you really Zeus' daughter?" Natsum asked. She still could not believe that the daughter of a god was in front of them. Although it was not surprising either, since they had already spoken to one of Zeus' daughters before, and she was much more impressive than Talia. "Yes, I was born of the union of Zeus and a mortal 18 years ago," Talia answered Natsum's question with a smile. "Talia-san, when did you join the Artemis Hunters?" This time, it was Sei's turn to ask. "Not long ago, a few months ago. I really didn't expect Lady Artemis to give me this opportunity." She responded again with sincerity. "Is it true that you slayers have to keep your virginity intact?" The one who asked this time was Cookie. Talia seemed to have caught the boy's interest. Although the interest was just interest, it had only been a few hours since he had confessed his problems with the girls, so that wasn't going to be solved so quickly. But it seemed Talia didn't share that interest, and it was obvious from her shaking eyebrow. Draco had noticed that Talia didn't like being the center of attention very much, even though she was hiding it very well. And he had also noticed that Mordred was watching her carefully. If Draco's most powerful servant could detect that this girl was dangerous, then it was best to tread carefully. "Thanks for saving me earlier," said the newest addition to the group, Shigen Nanaduru. And it was not directed at Draco or the group. She had thanked Talia. "Don't thank me. I was just leading you to them." Apparently, Talia had been helping Shigen escape. No one knew the reason. Perhaps she just wanted to help the poor girl. The bad thing about being inside the car was that Draco could not communicate with the tree spirits, so they had to move cautiously. He had his senses expanded to the max, looking for any sign of enemies in the area. Soon they reached the entrance to the village, and it was there that Draco found many presences inside the houses. They probably belonged to the people who lived in the village, but it never hurt to investigate. They all got out of the limousine, as they could not continue on the road any longer. "Valina, take care of it." Draco relied on Valina's speed and ability to escape in case something happened. Besides, Draco doubted she'd find anything dangerous. They entered the village as well, although Valina was far ahead. The newcomers tensed up, feeling the tension of such a quiet environment in such a dark place. "What an unpleasant atmosphere," Natsum muttered as she hugged herself. Tobio and Sae agreed with her, while Draco and Lavinia remained calm. An atmosphere like this was nothing to Mordred and Talia. Suddenly, there was a strange sound. "Hiya!" Natsum let out a pathetic cry. Tobio and the others raised their guards, but what emerged was a raccoon. He moved his nose a little and quickly left. "What the hell, a raccoon?" Cookie lowered his arms and took a deep breath. Draco was enjoying the moment, as Natsum was holding him tightly. A few seconds later, she was still holding Draco. Though it was fine at first, Draco was not going to continue with her hugging him the whole time. "Give me your hand." Natsum nodded weakly and took Draco's hand. It was then that Valina returned from investigating the private homes. In each house, the inhabitants are sleeping. However, they are not sleeping just because it is night. It would be correct to say that someone forced them to sleep. That's what Valina informed them. So that's why no one helped us when we asked them for help. It seemed that Shigen had asked this village for help. I see. If they anticipated a possible battle, they might have used a technique to put people to sleep. It will be so that they won't cause any unnecessary trouble. Though if Draco were in his place, thinking like a villain, he would have killed all the villagers. However, if the situation gets complicated, the whole village may be wiped out. Draco warned of the possible consequences. At that moment, Draco felt a powerful aura at the time that he was not familiar with. It was a very powerful aura, and at least it was on the same level as Barakiel or Azazel. It is the aura of Sadnal. Hey, so he came here directly himself. Valina, who had known the cadre personally, recognized him instantly. The big fish had shown up. This had become quite complicated in a single moment, though it was not as if Draco was not prepared for this. Mordred, it's your time to shine. Take care of Satinel, and don't use your noble phantasm unless you have to. I understand, Mordred responded and disappeared. No, she didn't disappear. She moved at extremely high speeds, but the cracks in the ground where she used to be meant that she had taken on a powerful impulse. Draco had his reasons for not letting Mordred use her noble phantasm. She would likely be able to cause severe injury to Satinel, or even kill him if he was not careful. But that would mean that all the random enemies around the map would retreat in fear, and that was not what Draco wanted. Perhaps even the best thing that could happen for Draco, in terms of experience, was to let Satinel escape so that he could gather more random enemies and gain more levels. Shigen, Draco called her. Why, yes, sir. She responded, surprised. Take us to where Koga Hyusuk is. It wasn't a request, but an order. It was not the most pleasant thing to do. But, as she embraced her sacred gear tightly, she nodded. While Mordred fights Satinel, we will go after the last Shirakuma. By the way, Shigen, do not use that sacred gear unless I tell you otherwise. That creature can destroy the entire area if you're not careful. Upon hearing this statement, Tobio and the other Ryuka students were surprised. The demon that Shigen held was a very powerful sacred gear, the strongest of the Shirakuma. However, Shigen found those words very wrong. I don't think Pokuin is such a despicable boy to do that. Pokuin? Is that this boy's name? Natsum asked curiously. Po! Just as Natsum asked, the demon opened its large mouth that was hidden under the mask. From the sharp fangs lined up in its mouth, it let out a scream that sounded like Po. From the cry of Po, he became Pokuin, Shigen said as she embraced her sacred gear warmly. Draco took a mental note, swearing to himself that Shigen was forbidden to name one of his descendants. He didn't want to have a boy or girl named Wa or anything like that. Seeing Mordred leaving, Valina complained directly to Draco. I want to go fight Satinel too. Of course, there was no way Draco would let her do that. To fight someone of that caliber, you must first learn to wear the armor. The armor Draco was talking about was nothing but Valina's balance breaker. At Draco's words, the intrepid smile on Valina's face faded, and her expression became uncharacteristic. Coo, I understand. Draco smiled as he saw that Valina was no longer insisting. Shigen, where's Koga? Draco asked her, but he already knew where the last Shirakuma was. In fact, he had already located all the people within the forest. Mordred, be careful. Satinel is not alone. It's probably the members of the Abyss team who are with him. Don't worry, I just have to crush them all. Well, Mordred shouldn't have much trouble escaping the place if the situation gets complicated. It seemed that that boy, Koga, was fighting the remnants of the Utsusimi agency right now, which was upsetting Draco. Koga was stealing Draco's EXP, while Draco was thinking that Shigen was pointing in Koga's direction. I came from that mountain over there. On the way, Kogakuin stayed on the mountain to oppose some scary people. They all nodded and headed in that direction. About 10 minutes later, the group was moving along a country road that passed through rice fields. As they shone their flashlight on the road, they headed for the mountain. We walk and walk and walk and walk, and all we see is nothing but rice paddies, Cookie complained. He was not the only one upset, as Draco wanted to hurry to where Koga was so that he could kill those people. However, Talia was in his way. He had to finish the mission without anyone dying, but he did not know if that was the only goal she had to accomplish. Tobio and the others were under stress, and the constant crunch was not helping. Munch Munch by Pokuin. According to Shigen, Pokuin is a glutton. Apparently, his stomach is always empty, so she has to feed him constantly. It's strange, since sacred gears shouldn't need the food. Shigen's sacred gear was feeding off the emergency rations Tobio had bought for his companions. Shigen's stomach let out a sound at the same time, so he was provided with a type of gelatin drink that Tobio and the others had brought for their own use. It was to provide energy rather than food, but Shigen ended up drinking it all. Then she began to eat the nutrition bars. Natsum then shared some anecdotes about Shigen. It seemed that she, like her sacred gear, was a glutton at school. Maybe there was a little connection between the two. But what drew Draco's attention was the conversation Shigeon had with Natsum afterwards. Nanadar-san, there's one thing I'd like to ask. Why did you refuse the Governor General's help? We didn't hear that you refused cooperation with Azazel, and were acting on your own. That was what Barakiel and Azazel had explained to the Shirakuma. All emotion faded from Shigeon's face. The truth is that Kogakuen and I were temporarily captured by the enemy. The students were surprised, but the rest already knew about it. Were you temporarily captured by the Utsusimi agency? But you're perfectly fine, Natsum said, surprised. It was normal for her to be surprised, as she had seen what the Utsusimi agency was capable of. Shigen shook her head. It wasn't the Utsusimi agency. Those who captured us were cows. They called themselves those who were forced to create chaos. This was something new to Draco, something he didn't know about. Could it be that Satinel and Augusta were the founders of the Cows Brigade? And could it be that the chaos has something to do with the creation of that criminal organization? Draco doubted that it was Ophis who actually created the organization, so he did not know who did. But it made sense if it was Satinel who created it. Locking themselves away is a place that's kind of like a research institution somewhere. They wanted a means to extract a sacred gear. To extract Pokken, they subjected Kogakuen and me to some kind of experiment several times. Finally, I think he was a great reformer there or something. He was a beautiful man. That person came to an agreement with Kogakuen. Koga had made a deal with a man who was the leader of the hostile cows organization. As for what Kogakuen did for him, it was becoming a bit frightening. Shigeon was hesitant to talk. Her expression had been so realistic. Samejima asked, "What?" So Kogakuen turned into something scary. It happened just when Shigeon seemed about to answer Samejima's question. A thunderous roar of gun. It echoed from the direction of the mountain. Everyone simultaneously turned to look in that direction. It had come from the precise direction they were headed. But the sound at this point was not quite usual. Shigeon squeezed out a voice as she embraced Pokuen. Kogakuen, so you became that again. Shigeon shuddered. This supernatural wave. The aura that could be felt from the mountain, Draco knew that this was something very powerful. The whole group rushed to that spot. Even Talia and Valina had a grave expression on their faces. As they headed toward the place where Koga seemed to be, sounds of explosions and powerful impacts began to be heard. Koga had been dragged into a fight with someone strong. Asking the spirits of the forest a quick question, it seemed the boys from the Utsusimi agency were giving it their all to fight Koga. Valina started to mumble at that moment. What? Why? What the hell? Is that really true? She seemed to be talking to Albion, and the conversation was shocking enough to make her lose her temper. Valina, did you learn anything? Natsum asked, and I'm surprised at how many times Natsum speaks on this novel. It seems that maybe I should speak so that everyone here can listen. A majestic voice was heard from Valina. Draco, who had heard it before, recognized it as the voice of Albion. Hello, Draco. This is the first time I've spoken to the others. Looking closer, the mouth of the stuffed dragon placed on Valina's shoulder moved, and from there came the voice of Albion. What's that? The students asked in surprise. I'm one of the two heavenly dragons, the one known as Vanishing Dragon, the White Dragon Emperor, Albion. Allow me to express my apologies for my late introduction. Heavenly D-Dragon. Talia muttered in shock. It seemed she didn't expect to hear the voice of one of the most powerful beings in the world. Since there are many things Valina is inexperienced at, I use this device to make my voice heard by those outside. Since Draco is a dragon like me, this device is not necessary for us to communicate. Albion, I'd rather you didn't say so much, Valina said with some dissatisfaction. If it's like that, my apologies. Draco interrupted the conversation between Valina and Albion. Albion, what have you noticed? Just now, the huge mountain aura before us was extremely similar to a certain phenomenon. Draco frowned at Albion's words. When a sacred gear and its owner achieve a drastic change in body and spirit, they achieve a totally different mastery. Draco knew what Albion was referring to at this point. Balance Breaker. The first and only Balance Breaker Draco had seen to date was Tobios. But he was a special case, as he was born in the Balance Breaker state. Yes, the wave of this aura was extremely similar to that phenomenon. Albion confirmed Draco's words. Kogakuin said that man also called it that way. Shigen added. Natsum asked at this point. So Kogakuin was able to evolve his sacred gear to the point that it transcends ours? No, that doesn't seem to be the case. I have a good knowledge of balance breakers. Consequently, I find the aura incomprehensible. It seemed that even Albion, who knew a lot about balance breakers, was perplexed by the aura. Draco had a suspicion, but they had already reached the location of Koga. Lavinia produced light using her magic and illuminated the surroundings. As for what was there, ugh! Natsum and SAE's involuntary reaction was to puke. What was revealed by the magical illumination was a horrible scene covered in blood. All over the area, there were men in business suits who had been turned into gruesome corpses. Some were cut to pieces, some were missing limbs, and some had no heads. It was an extremely gory scene. Among all the bodies, there was only one living boy. The boy had unkempt black hair with gold highlights here and there, and an indescribably sinister thing curled up around his body. Inspect status. Koga Hyusuke. Race, human. Status, normal. HP, 75/98. Strength, 21. Defense, 14. Magic, 10. Agility, 26. He was Koga Hyusuke. He wore his old-school uniform, and there was a gauntlet on his right arm that worried Draco. That was very similar to Issei's boosted gear. As Koga looked into the light, he was wiping away the blood that had splashed on his face with his hand. Koga noticed that Shigen was there, and said with a cheerful expression, "Oh, it is Nanaduru. Then you returned. Something is happening. Different from this, of course." As he noticed Tobio and the others around Shigen, he began counting them one by one. Let's see, Ikkyu, Samechan, Managawa, and Tuju, and 4 foreigners. Did the 4 fiends line up by any chance? End up becoming the 8 fiends? Next to them was a body that looked like a mass of deep black fur. Under a closer look, it looked like a black furry dog. With a mouth protruding like a dog and 4 limbs with claws, the creature seemed to embody the characteristics of a dog. But with the fur covering the area around the eyes, its face was imperceptible. Koga seemed to have noticed the look of the group on the creature, so he said, "Ah, this is Blitz. He's what you would call my sacred gear." As expected, this was the last of the Shirakuma. Directing his gaze at Jean, who stood beside Tobio, Koga was stunned. "That dog is exactly like my Blitz. Are Ikkyu or Tuju, by any chance, one of the Shirakuma?" Tobio shook his head. "No, SAE and I are not of the Shirakuma. Jean is my sacred gear." Hearing that, Koga looked at Jean with great interest. "By the way, your clothes are quite unique, though I cannot say that they are not to my liking." It seemed that Koga was speaking truthfully when they said he liked it. He was going to continue, but Draco interrupted him. "Well, I think we can talk later. Right now we have guests to attend to." Hearing Draco's statement, everyone simultaneously put on their guard and prepared to fight. The one who appeared from the depths of the mountain was an old foreign woman in a purple robe. Augusta of the Purple Flame. Draco had already met her briefly at the Utsusimi Agency Fortress. Augusta had brought a girl in Gothic-style clothing, her disciple Walburga, along with several wizards. "We have been surrounded," Lavinia says as she looked at Augusta. She was in front of them. As she had said, the wizards had surrounded the group. Not having noticed when they had been surrounded, Tobio and the other students were especially surprised. Augusta looked at Draco and the others squinting. "As I had heard that there was a hard fight between the remnants of the Utsusimi Agency and the Shirakuma, I thought that if I came here with my disciples, I would find the dragon and Glenda's disciple," Augusta said with a voice that sounded pleased. Later, a chill began to settle over the area. It seemed that the coldest winter had fallen upon them, and it was spreading throughout the area. The source of this outbreak was Lavinia. Her expression had become terribly cold, and when the breath could already be seen, she said the following. "This is just great. As I help my teammates, I'll eradicate them all." The old witch showed a bold smile, obviously trying to provoke Lavinia. Those scary eyes are very different from you, Glenda's disciple. In this state of increasing tension, a loud voice echoed from the sky. One of the Longinus, incinerate anthem. Chief Mourner's crucified stand of purple flame. Then the user is the Wizard of East Oz. In a tall tree, standing on a branch, was the figure of a silver-haired girl, Velina. As for when she had climbed the tree, Draco hadn't noticed. She had probably decided to make her entrance cool, so she had chosen that spot. Wings of light were coming out of her back, coming from her sacred gear. As she crossed her arms, Velina said to Augusta with a magnificent smile, "I am Velina Lucifer, the being who carries the white dragon inside her. As the bearers of Longinus, I wish to compete with you by all means." Natsum was frightened when she saw that Velina was climbing a tree so high. "Va Velina, it's dangerous, come down from there. You can also provoke them from the ground." But Velina ignored Natsum. She and Augusta shared glances. The witch laughed with a ka-ka-ka, and that laugh is disgusting to read and write. "Oh, so a little girl like you is the white dragon emperor of this age. Also, as rumored, she is the successor of Lucifer. This is quite interesting. Well, maybe you'll enjoy this too." As she spoke, Velina flapped her wings of light, descending to the surface. Everyone prepared combat positions. Tobio had his scythe, Jean his sword, Byakusa sat on Samajima's shoulder, and Natsum commanded Griffin. Draco summoned Gondiva, without thinking, and prepared to annihilate whoever made the first move. Talia, who was at Draco's side, fulfilled her role as supervisor. Somehow, I don't really understand, but is it right to say that Purple Grandma is our opponent? Koga broke the silence. The boy seemed quite lost in this situation. Augusta moved her cane and drew a magic circle in the air as she spoke. "It's all right. It seems that your tastes understand." At the old woman's reply, Koga nodded and said, "I see. I understand now. Well, then I guess this is the sequel of our fight." Blitz. Koga, advancing along with Blitz, extended his right glove and acted on it with his left hand. The gauntlet began to release an ominous glow. Simultaneously, Blitz, who was next to him, began to release a deep black aura from his entire body, which resonated with the glow of the gauntlet. The vibrations caused the atmosphere to shake violently, and when the gauntlet made a sound, Koga raised his voice. "Balance breaker. Sixiong Hundun, overbooster." A massive aura filled the area with Koga and Blitz in its center, and a dazzling glow spread along with it. When the light stopped, what was there was a shimmering black exoskeleton armor. It had a bestial shape where the head and limbs resembled those of a dog, and what looked like the long, hardened fur grew from the back of the head. In the center of the body, right in the center of the chest, there shone something that looked like a gem. Blitz, who used to stand next to Koga, was gone, while the suit looked very much like Koga's sacred gear. As Draco suspected, this was an artificial balance breaker. He didn't know about this before. Draco knew about artificial sacred gears and counterbalance, its form of balance breaker. Still, he had never heard of an artificially created balance breaker of a natural sacred gear. Koga Hyosuk. Race, human. Status, normal. HP, 75 of 93. Strength, 853. Defense, 360. Magic, 560. Agility, 1,285. The balance breaker was obviously based on the scale mail, balance breaker, the boosted gear, and divine dividing. The boost to statistics was really interesting, but there was something that Draco had noticed. Koga's total HP had decreased by activating the balance breaker. It was evident that this balance breaker was far from perfect and was a double-edged sword. Velina seemed to have understood the similarity of this balance breaker with her sacred gear, as she nodded in admiration. "I see. So the research that uses our armor as a reference has already gone so far." Augusta, who had been watching this, held her hand to her chin with great interest. She was looking at the gauntlet on Koga's right arm. He used it to force the balance breaker. No, it seems to be a kind of madness. Is there some degree of compensation for that? In any case, you can say that that man is ruthless. I guess we have to act too. Walburga. At her teacher's call, a girl dressed in lowly Gothic style came out of the back, dancing as if she were happy to be in the limelight. Yes, sir. Ashi-sama. You will cooperate with the biz team along with the other wizards and have fun with that boy. You feel fun. Great. What an interesting idea. Walburga's gaze went through everyone present, but her gaze stopped at Draco's figure. Her innocent eyes were cold as he watched Tobio and the others. Still, they were terrifyingly warm as they landed on Draco's body. Draco's body trembled as he saw her licking her lips with her tongue. The otaku instincts that he had earned in his previous life screamed, Yandere detected. Escape, but he forced himself to keep his composure. Though he was now a dragon, some things were marked in the depths of his unconscious. Now Augusta's eyes turned to Lavinia. I think I should tell you about Glenda. However, I will only do so when you can defeat me. Come along, Ice Princess. Augusta quietly disappeared into the nightly darkness of the mountain. In response to Augusta, Lavinia worried about what to do next. She wanted to pursue her, but she couldn't leave her companions behind. Lavinia decided on her companions and formed a magic circle directed at Augusta's subordinates. However, Draco put an arm on Lavinia's shoulder. Go, Draco said seriously. In Draco's eyes, there was no doubt, and that filled Lavinia with confidence. She nodded with a face full of emotion. She knew Draco was doing this for her. Draco knew how important this was to Lavinia, so he let her have a chance to fight Augusta. Yes, go and give that witch a good thrashing. We'll take care of this. Natsum encouraged Lavinia. Lavinia turned to see how the others were cheering her on. She immediately turned to pursue Augusta. Draco, everyone, thank you. Lavinia ran off in search of Augusta. With Augusta and Lavinia leaving, Walburga gave instructions to the wizards. Well then, first of all, let's blow it up. When Walburga raised her hand, the magicians also raised their hands in preparation, forming magic circles. They were about to shoot magic with them, but the sound of the air being cut off echoed nearby, and before the eyes of Tobio and the others, two phenomena occurred at the same time. In an instant, the magicians' magic circles were destroyed. The first of the phenomena was a kind of black whip that moved from one side to the other at great speed throughout the area, breaking the magical circles. As for those long, narrow things, they grew out of the head of Koga's armor. It was something that took the form of a hair whose rigidity had been altered and was destroying the magical circles of the wizards as if they possessed a will of their own. At this, Walburga smiled boldly. Wow, that's a good method of attack. Isn't it fun? Walburga was also forming a magic circle, from which she was about to release magic. In response, Koga's hair that had acquired the hardness of a whip spread. Just as he had destroyed other magic circles, it was hoped that he would also destroy Walburga's magic circle. But Walburga's magic circle repelled Koga's attack. Without a doubt, she had improved at a monstrous rate in these 2 months. Draco had no doubt that she was a genius among geniuses. Walburga was on Lavinia's level. Probably, to counteract the ease with which Draco defended himself from her magic, she worked on creating magical circles with more powerful spells. However, that wasn't enough. She had barely repelled Koga's attack when the second of the phenomena occurred. The magic circle had been instantly destroyed, and all Tobio and the others saw was the remnant of an arrow. Unbelievable! Even Talia couldn't help but be surprised at the power that arrow carried. Not only that, but the arrow itself was exquisite. She had not seen anyone create an arrow of that level from magic, except for Artemis' divine arrows. Guys, it's obvious Lavinia is heading into a trap. Would you do me a favor and keep her company while I take care of this? Tobio, you're the temporary leader. Draco wasn't the only one who thought that, since it was obvious. Everyone was worried about Lavinia's safety at the moment, but she was strong, so she wasn't going to have any problems in the short term. Managua-san, Nanavu-san, Samajima-kun, come on, don't go too far from me. SAEs. Tobio did not disappoint Draco and acted immediately. This was not the time for hesitation, and Tobio demonstrated his innate ability to lead at this point. One did not become the strongest fighter in Grigori without innate talent. Yes, without a doubt, Tobio was the strongest fighter in all of Grigori. Although Draco could not tell if Valley was stronger than Tobio in his Diabolos dragon or not, it was a fact that Tobio could easily fight Valley in his Juggernaut drive while Tobio used the first version of his balance breaker. Tobio with his Abyss side balance breaker, the upgrade of his balance breaker. Perfectus Tenebri Lycon et Fortis Densis Laylaps, Dark Demon Beast of the Abyss, or Dog God of the Heroes Eternal Nightblade, is extremely strong. With this one, he reaches the semi-finals of the Azazel Cup, defeating teams composed by gods and other Longinus like Dulio Gesualdo. He can cut through God-class defenses with ease. With Canis Lycaon in that state, he can cut through literally anything. He can even use the godly fire of the god Aino Ohabari, the god who killed Izanami while being born. That's what Draco expected from Tobio, a warrior of the highest order loyal only to him. A person capable of leading the best group of killers like Slashdog Team. Valina Koga, you go with them? Draco did not hesitate to order the remaining two. How could Draco let them steal his experience? Valina, who trusted Draco to death and was also concerned about Lavinia, though she would not admit it, nodded and followed Tobio. It can't be helped. It's annoying to be under Tobio Iq's instructions. Yet, I'm interested in the forced balance breaker of this man named Koga. While I fight there, I may have a chance to see him up close. Koga did not react at first, probably because he was not used to receiving orders. He frowned. Why should I listen to you? He asked. He had every right to ask. A boy that Koga knew nothing about was now ordering him around out of the blue. Shigen Nanadoru, you're in love with her, aren't you? Koga squinted dangerously as he looked at Draco. Suddenly, Koga felt danger and dodged quickly, an arrow brushing past his cheek. Relax that look, I don't like it, Draco said in an unemotional voice. Shigen is in my care from now on, as my mission is to bring back the remaining Shirakuma. However, there are no specifications as to whether they are to be dead or alive. Draco did not have the time to try and convince Koga to join him peacefully, and he did not want to waste time fighting him either. Draco could transform into a dragon and overcome him in power, finishing him off quickly. Tisich, I'll listen to you for now. With that, Koga turned and left. So, are you ready for a bloody show, daughter of Zeus? Draco gave Talia a half-smile. After separating from Draco and the others, Mordred had been moving toward the area where that powerful aura was. She couldn't fly, but her running speed was no less than a car on the highway. Although the place wasn't exactly close, Mordred didn't take more than a few minutes to get there. The place where she finally arrived was an old Shinto shrine that had been a place of worship in the town. However, Draco had already warned Mordred that it was not appropriate to access shrines of worship of other mythologies without the permission of the gods worshipped in this country. Neither of them cared about something like this, however, having to deal with politics was always complicated. So Azazel's envoy is a beautiful woman. I'm surprised. I was expecting a burly guy like Barakeel. Mordred turned her gaze in the direction from which the voice came. The one who appeared in the shade of a great tree was a tall man dressed in a fallen angel armor. Picking this place wasn't on purpose. The man had brown hair over male facial features, and his silver eyes could glow dimly even in the darkness of the night. The man continued as he ran his hand through his hair. The god that is worshipped here will not appear even if the people of the village are annihilated. He doesn't care about anything as long as we don't destroy the sanctuary. When it comes to the gods of this country, it seems that, for many of them, regardless of the mythological system from which the other party originates, they basically don't care as long as they don't pollute their territory. The man shrugged. Rather, it is the people who worship these gods who are strict with foreigners. Those guys are a real pain in the ass. Mordred looked at the man in confusion. What the fuck was he saying? I don't give a shit about the gods, Mordred responded with sincerity. That's what she really thought. Where were the gods when she was suffering under Morgan? Where were the gods when Artorias suffered while she ruled? Where were the gods when Britain was being invaded, the men murdered, and the women raped? No, the gods never showed up. In fact, Mordred did not believe that the gods really existed, or at least not until Draco spoke of his encounter with one of them. But even if they did exist, what did they have to do with Mordred? If the god said stand up to Draco, stand up to her, Mordred only had to do what she was best at, attack with everything she had. The man, Satnal, raised an eyebrow when he heard Mordred's answer. This girl was very interesting and powerful. Yes, Satnal could feel the invisible aura of power that Mordred's presence emitted. She was brimming with power, lots of power. Satnal raised his left hand gently. The movement was similar to restricting something. From the moment she had come here, and after listening to Draco, Mordred had understood something. She was surrounded by a group of killers. Without a doubt, their backing was the protégés of Satnal, the Abyss team. An unpleasant fighting atmosphere drifted through the area. This unpleasant atmosphere was something that excited Mordred. She had been raised on the battlefield, and enjoying this second life had not changed her love for it. Satnal says, I just want the same possibilities to investigate sacred gear as the other researchers. However, Azazel had no intention of decreasing his degree of supervision. Mordred understood what he meant. She only had to connect dots with what Draco had informed her about this man. So you betrayed your organization to achieve your own goals, joining other groups that could help you achieve them. That's right. Mordred couldn't help but smile bitterly. Wasn't that very similar to what she did? Mordred dodged those thoughts and turned her attention to the dark aura she had detected several miles away. It was a powerful aura, but not on the level of the man in front of her. This is your business too. Satnal smiled, looking happy that Mordred had brought up the subject. Yes, it was a theory that Azazel and I worked on together. However, Azazel ended up rejecting it because the sacred gear user has to pay a high price for this. Research this theory that Mordred had had enough of this conversation. With Clarent in hand, crimson electric shocks began to surround the sword. If Mordred doesn't have her secret of pedigree on, she can use her crimson lightning without any problem. She has no need to hide her identity in this world, so secret of pedigree is completely useless her. On the other hand, Mordred should receive a boost to all her physical parameters as well as her charisma. However, since she was never recognized as the king or his successor, Mordred cannot receive that boost. At least she can channel all her hate into the sword, so she can use Clarent Blood Arthur. Master told me that I have to stop you from supporting the witches, but that it wouldn't hurt if I ended up killing you either. Although it would be much better if he finished you off personally, I wouldn't mind killing you all right now. Mordred took a look around. She couldn't see the killers hiding, but Mordred knew they were there. I'm so scared. I don't want to die yet. Satnal cried out in exaggeration, so he snapped his fingers all at once. Before Mordred could react, a fog began to roll in over the area. In the face of Mordred's confusion, Satnal says, "It's a sacred gear transfer type." Mordred remembered reading some of it in the reports Draco had given her, but she could not remember the specifications. The sacred gear in particular was called the Forest of Disconcert. By using its ability in a part of the forest, it was able to guide those who stepped on it to any place the user wanted. A few seconds later, Mordred felt several familiar people approaching through the mist. And those who appeared inside the fog were Mordred-san? It was the group of people Draco had sent to help Lavinia, led by Tobio. Satnal flashed a smile once he realized they had been brought there. Now let's finish what I have to do. Draco was surrounded by wizards. 1, 2, 4, 8. 12 wizards and Walburga were surrounding Draco at this time. A total of 13 enemies, of which Draco had to kill 12 of them. Walburga couldn't die, at least not right now. She was the one who was going to lead one of the main groups of the Cows Brigade, so she was going to bring more and more experience to Draco. Walburga was a golden goose, but she also laid golden eggs. Draco was going to let her lay golden eggs, experience, constantly, and kill her when she can no longer produce. Actually, there were 15 wizards at the beginning. 2 of them had tried to go after Tobio and the rest, however, and Draco had killed them with 2 arrows before anyone could react. Oni-san, Walburga missed you. The Gothic lowly screamed with joy, though there was a mark of madness in her eyes. Yes, there was no doubt that his mind was not the most stable. She was cute, but she was dangerous. Fireballs. A fireball suddenly came over Draco, followed by 4 more. The fireballs came from different directions, well coordinated. The wizards worked well together, and those fireballs had considerable power behind them. "Look out!" Talia shouted when she saw that Draco was not moving. That's right, Draco was just giving him a lazy look at the fireballs. Hadn't Walburga learned from what happened last time? She should know that this level of magic was incapable of harming him. All 4 fireballs hit at the same time, creating a huge explosion with Draco at its center. The smoke created by the explosion covered the area, and the wizards began to argue among themselves. Is he dead yet? How disappointing. So a dragon is just this. But Walburga didn't think so. She might be crazy, but she wasn't dumb. It was impossible that only 4 attacks of that level could finish off a dragon, no matter how low its level. On guard! Fireballs! Water and ice! Gravity magic! Prepare barriers! Walburga gave orders while she prepared a great spell herself. The magicians, although many thought this would be easy, did what Walburga asked. At that moment, the sound of the wind whistling was heard in the area. 5 arrows were fired at practically the same time and killed 5 of the wizards. In a single instant, a third of the wizards had been eradicated. All 5 had died the same way, with an arrow in the center of their foreheads. Even Talia was surprised. For someone who had not received Artemis' blessing, his speed of fire and accuracy were exquisite. The wizards seemed not to care about the death of their companions and continued to channel their spells. He didn't find this strange. Hexenact was a group formed by stray magicians, so it was not surprising that they ignored the deaths of their companions. In the next second, Draco dodged the torrent of magic that was heading his way. It wasn't that he was going to be affected by these attacks, but he didn't want his clothes to be torn. Akatsuki's suit was made of a special material, which could resist low-level attacks. That was why it was still intact even after receiving 4 low-level fireballs. However, the suit was not going to withstand all the attacks he was going to get if he didn't dodge. As he dodged, Draco fired 2 more arrows, and with them, he killed one of the wizards. For when Draco was dodging, the wizards set up a personal barrier. Only a Draco arrow should be enough to pierce shields, but Walburga backed up those shields with reinforcement magic. Draco's magic in his human form was barely over 200 points, while the magic of any of the wizards here exceeded that figure. However, Draco's high level of arrow creation, as well as his fate skill that further enhanced those arrows, made that difference in magical power small and even greater than the magical power of those mages. The problem was that Walburga's magic power was too high, so the reinforcement she had given the wizards made their shields capable of defending against one of Draco's arrows. Draco didn't know this, but he suspected it, so he had shot a second arrow to check this, and it had turned out that his suspicion was correct. Wizards could defend themselves from a Draco's arrow, but so what? Draco only had to shoot 1 more arrow per person, and he could afford that perfectly. With 6 wizards dead, there were only 6 others left to finish this. Draco didn't want to waste any more time on this, as Lavinia could be in danger right now. With 2 more shots, the 7th wizard died. Draco felt danger at that moment. He knew that if he didn't dodge this attack, his clothes weren't the only thing that was going to get hurt. Walburga had finished channeling her magic spell, a large fireball, of a level of power extremely superior to the basic fireballs Draco had received at first. No, it was wrong to say it was a fireball. What came out of that magic circle could only be described as a real firestorm. The level of the spell was so high that Talia had to retreat from her hiding place to be unaffected by the spell. Even the other wizards had to dodge the remnants of the attack that were spreading. Draco quickly retreated and climbed to the top of a tree. From there, he took advantage of the wizards' hasty movements to shoot them down with 5 more arrows. They barely had time to react, and by the time they realized it, they were dead. Of course, Draco had been getting experience all this time, and the notification that came to him when he killed the last wizard was as follows. To follow Lavinia, who had followed Augusta, Tobio, and the others went into the depths of the mountain. However, suddenly, they were enveloped by a dense fog. And to their surprise, when they realized what had happened, in front of their eyes were Mordred and a tall man. Huh? What is this? We were following Lavinia, And now, in front of us, is Mordred saying, huh? Natsum could not hide her astonishment. Tobio was in the same situation. However, he had thought that the earlier fog was caused by a supernatural power, one that had transported them to this place. The tall man approached them as he watched them with his silver eyes. His gaze was serious towards them, a penetrating gaze that could even see their souls. Valina tensed when she recognized him, but a bold smile soon appeared on her face. Her body exuded a powerful fighting intent. The false god, the white dragon empress, and the sure Akuma. It has been a while since we met for some, and I am pleased to meet the newcomers. I am Satinal. In the presence of this man, those who did not know him, Tobio, Natsum, Sae, and Cookie, were completely shocked. That is because they recognized the name behind all the incidents that occurred. He is the cadre who betrayed Azazel and Grigori, the final enemy. Shigyan said quietly as she held Pokuin. He's that handsome man I mentioned earlier. That person was the one who made a contract with Kogakuin. Everyone gave Koga a look, remembering his earlier transformation. It was not hard to see that the man in front of them was the one in charge of that transformation. The mastermind behind the entire incident with the Utsasimi was probably this man. No, they were certain it was this man. Jean, who was on guard against Satinal's presence, was using his eyes and ears to investigate the surroundings. Somehow, the enemy had already completely surrounded the place. In response to that, without making a sound, Jean raised his battle aura. Seeing that, Satinal showed a happy expression. Satinal pointed at Jean as he spoke. You, false god boy, are you aware that Lycaon's will resides within this sacred gear? I heard something about that from my leader. Draco had already explained to Tobio everything he needed to know about his sacred gear. Of course, he didn't tell him everything, since there were things even Draco didn't know. He had left that to Barakiel, as Grigori knew everything that had happened to the previous owners of the Longinus. At least Draco had told her everything that mattered in its origin. Satinal mentioned things similar to Draco. The paradise that appears in the Greek mythology, Arcadia. It is said that Lycaon was the name of the king who ruled it. Due to the accumulation of faults against the main god Zeus, he earned Zeus' anger and was transformed into a beast. His name was passed down through history as an evil king. Lycaon, the first werewolf, the evil king who is said to be the true ancestor of this race. As for the story of Lycaon, she was very famous for becoming a wolf. It was even said that it was the temporary form that a god took when he walked the earth. Satinal looked at Jean with narrowed eyes. But it's not a wolf that's your business. He's become a dog. It is a false god who is not a wolf at all. The reason for that is something that even the Grigori have not been able to find out. Even this may be a very rare case for the god who created all this. Probably, not even God had thought of this happening. Satinal raised his index finger. But your sacred gear is a special case in which more than one will be lodged. Yes, that's right. Even among the Longinus, it's a strange thing to have two wills in one sacred gear. Aim no Ohabari. The strongest sword among all the Tatsuka no Tsurugi, which are swords considered to be sacred swords because they possess great sacred power. Although it is considered a god, it is still a sword. That existence is also housed in sacred gear. The source of the swords and blades created by Jean is the Aim no Ohabari. However, this sword had lost its divinity as a result of being under the influence of Lycaon, thus becoming a malevolent sword. Satinal adds, so, the fact that you have appeared in the lineage of the Himejima is not strange. The one they worship is God Hino Kagutsuki. The one who beheaded such a god was the Aim no Ohabari. She is what is known as a god-slayer's sword. That's a mixture of Greek and Japanese mythology. Plus, it's the fusion of King Lycaon, who had a bad attitude towards Zeus, and the sword that killed a god. What a coincidence that the creator of sacred gear was so greedy or was crazy, don't you think? The false dog god who possesses the power to kill the gods. Satinal asked Tobio that, but Canis Lycaon being a sacred gear with two different powers, it is considered a Longinus. However, because the two consciousnesses are totally opposite, its original characteristics have been deformed and taken the current form. Tobio responded with great caution. I'm terrified to know about my power. But to overcome the obstacles in front of us, this power is necessary to survive. You seem to have a great interest in sacred gear. However, for me, all I care about is getting everyone home safely. From his shadow, Tobio made a scythe appear. Satinel saw Tobio's movements with an ironic face and pointed to the scythe. You see, that blade is releasing a sinister aura. As Satinel has said, the sharp blade of the scythe that Tobio is holding is releasing a dangerous aura. Tobio, being the bearer, felt that something dark was emerging. Tobio felt that the being inside him was trying to overcome his will, trying to take control of his consciousness. He could still control himself, but if his strength continued to increase, how will all this end? Satinel then showed an evil smile. Besides, you're not the only anomaly here. Aren't you, descendant of Lucifer? What do you mean? Valina frowned. She spread her wings of light instantly. Valina knew how dangerous the man in front of her was. Satinel was a man who had deceived someone like Azazel, so he couldn't be underestimated. You carry in your veins the blood of the Mal Lucifer, and you also possess the White Dragon Emperor. It is not an exaggeration to say that in a few years we will be able to call you the strongest White Dragon Emperor in history. I pity the Red Dragon Emperor of this generation, as he will never be able to match you. When Valina heard Satinel mention Issei, she couldn't help but mutter pervert. Still, don't you think it's very curious? For two anomalies to have come together under the same banner. Whoever did it has to be someone really scary and interesting. Not only that, but this Lady Knight here is giving me goosebumps. Contrary to his words, Satinel was very calm. He even smiled faintly in Mordred's direction, seemed unconcerned about the danger she posed at all. Meanwhile, Tobio continued to worry about the dark aura emanating from his scythe. That aura should belong to Lycaon. Satinel didn't let this go. Boy, what are you going to do then? That evil king, Lycaon, seems to be interested in taking over your body. What will you do if that happens? A melodious voice interrupted Tobio before he could speak. Could you please not give this boy any wrong ideas? Who appeared as a beautiful girl with black hair, Suzaku Himejima. All over her body you could feel a lot of fighting aura. She seemed to be a little angry. When the next leader of the Himejima family appeared, the smile on Satinel's face disappeared. The Suzuka beast of the Himejima family? Are you after the remains of the Utsasimi agency? In response to Satinel's words, Suzaku responded, You can say yes. Though we are few, I give my word that we will catch all the rest of that agency. However, do not hate me if I also catch or hurt the underlings of the Wizard of Oz. After all, that incident was created by you. As expected from the Himejima family, you're always quick to eliminate any threat to your family. Well, I've met a new friend, and I finally got to see the face of the fallen god. Well, then, I'll let my subordinates entertain you. While saying that, Satinel created a magic circle under his feet. Will you teleport? I will not allow it. Saying that, Suzuka quickly threw a powerful flame at Satinel. In response, Satinel created a defensive magical circle. Satinel's body was enveloped by the light generated by the magic circle under his feet. Let us meet again, ladies and gentlemen. When the glow of the magic circle ceased, Satinel had already disappeared. Suzaku immediately turned to Mordred. Miss, understanding Suzaku's intentions, Mordred introduced herself. Mordred, Suzaku nodded and asked, Miss Mordred, why didn't you help me stop him? I'm sure if we both acted together, we could have caught him. Actually, Suzaku was a little upset. This was a perfect opportunity to catch the mastermind behind the whole incident. However, Mordred hadn't even tried to delay him. My master's orders. All your complaints, keep them to yourself. I have no intention of hearing you cry with fancy words. Besides, I don't think it would have been that easy. You should have felt all those waiting to ambush us from the shadows, and you should know how lethal those guys' abilities are. This lady's master should be Draco. Although Suzaku was confused and did not understand what Draco was thinking, he should have his own reasons for doing so. After she sighed, she turned to those who were hidden in this area. Please come out. Since your leader has left, you have stayed to fight us, right? At the words of Suzaku, two men and a woman emerged from the shadows. One of the men was quite strange, although he had a well-worked physique, and the other man had a bandage wrapped around his right arm. The woman had her hair in 2 braids and held a teddy bear in her 2 arms, all of it damaged. They are all wearing a suit similar to Nephilim, the Abyss Team suit. These strange subjects were emanating a murderous aura from their bodies, and in their eyes, you could see their thirst for blood. Those eyes reflected the purest evil. Their abilities were also in the information they received. Therefore, the sacred gears these subjects possess are evil. They were neglected as children because their blood families abandoned them in fear of them. Not only that, but several people have tried to kill them in the past. They lived alone while seeing the dark side of humanity. Their personality was taken away from them, leaving only their instincts and abilities. They are also known to be killers. These people have done many bad things, and they must be eliminated as soon as possible. However, by gathering them together in Grigori, Satanel began to use them according to his will. The woman holding the teddy bear in her hands takes a step forward and says, "Oi, oi, you're sacred gear bearers too, aren't you?" She put aside the pretty smile on her face and put on an expression of disgust. "So, how many people have you killed? 5? 10? Or more?" Hearing those questions from the woman, the men started laughing in mockery. Mordred stepped forward and stuck her sword in front of her. Her bangs covered her eyes, making it impossible to evaluate her expression. "The people I have killed are countless. Have I killed hundreds? Have I killed thousands? Tens of thousands? I don't know, I haven't counted. But I can say that my actions caused the death of more people than you can ever kill in your lifetime. Do you think you have seen the worst of the world? Don't make me laugh. You don't know what true terror is. You don't know what it's like to live through a civil war. You don't know what it's like to fight to the death against your own people. You don't know what it feels like to be rejected by the person you admire. You don't know what it feels like to kill that person with your own hands. You don't know anything." Mordred spoke calmly, and every of her words reached the ears of all present. Everyone, including the members of the Abyss team, trembled at the purity and truth of her words. The girl went crazy. She began to move her head strangely sideways, and out of nowhere, she screamed, "You bitch! What do you know? I'll be killed. I'll be killed. Forgive me. I didn't do anything. I was just watching. I was just playing with that child. Yuri-chan and Mirai-chan wanted to play with this child too. So forgive me. I didn't do anything wrong. That child, Yuri-chan and Mirai-chan, ended up in pieces is not my fault." She stared at a fixed point, which indicated the beginning of the battle. The cuddly toy that the woman was holding in her arms moved away from her, and although that cuddly toy was lying on the ground, it began to grow and finally took on a gigantic size. What appeared in front of Mordred was a 10-foot-tall cuddly toy. The cuddly toy made a strange roar, and powerful fangs appeared when it opened its mouth. In the same way, sharp claws appeared in his hands. This was this girl's sacred gear. The strange man spat out a strange substance. Mordred dodged, and the tree behind her melted when it received the liquid. This boy could bring a highly toxic slime to life, but he couldn't create just one slime. The kid started spitting out slime all the time. The last boy, the one with the bandages on his right arm, removed the bandages. What was left was an arm with multiple mouths. The ability of this one was his arm, as those mouths could create multiple curses that were indefensible to anyone who heard them. These kids would probably put up a good fight for Tobio's group. But with Valina, Suzaku, and Koga here, this should be pretty easy. However, none of them needed to act. Mordred had raised her sword. Crimson lightning flashed through the blade, and she mumbled a few words. Crimson lightning. Lifting her blade to the heavens, Mordred let out all the mana that had accumulated on the sword, creating a deadly attack on all 3 humans. "It's over. I hope you, like me, have a better chance in your next life," Mordred muttered. She turned to the group still in shock. "Right, we're off." She gave the order she had received from Draco. But Natsum protested instantly. "No buts. These are Draco's orders. We've accomplished our goal by gathering the remaining Shirakuma. We're all leaving except Valina." Natsum wanted to protest more, but fell silent when she heard that Draco had personally ordered it. She wanted to go and rescue Lavinia, but it seemed that wasn't necessary. Valina, Draco orders you to go and support him and Lavinia in their fight against Augusta. So my big brother requires the services of the great white dragon empress.